Chapter 898. The Dark Lord's message. The next day after the battle, the manor lay in ruins. Debris and rubble were scattered everywhere, and the walls were crumbled and broken. The once beautiful garden was now a mess of uprooted plants and shattered ornaments. As word of the attack spread, people began to gather in the nearby towns to discuss what had happened. There were rumors and speculations about who the stranger could be and why he had attacked the manor. Some believed he was a rival cultivator of Eric, while others thought he might have been hired by a jealous competitor. Despite the chaos and destruction left in the aftermath, people could not help but feel a sense of awe at the power displayed by the mysterious attacker. The guards who had survived the battle were hailed as heroes, and there was talk of rebuilding the manor even better than it was before. As for the one who attacked them, no one knew what had become of him. Some whispered that he was a demon, while others dismissed him as a madman with too much power. But no matter what they thought, the memory of his attack would remain etched in their minds for years to come. The guards, armed and ready, stood in a tight perimeter around the ruined manor, their eyes darting around nervously as they scanned for any sign of danger. Meanwhile, the sounds of cracking wood and collapsing debris echoed through the air, serving as a haunting reminder of the fierce battle that had taken place there just hours before. As the guards remained on high alert, a group of mermans appeared out of nowhere, their bodies gracefully gliding through the air as they approached the perimeter. At the forefront of the group was Gleelus, a striking figure with large, expressive eyes and a fish-like mouth that twisted into a small smile as he surveyed the destruction around him. The mermans descended upon the hall with ease, their movements fluid and graceful as they maneuvered through the debris and broken roof of the manor. Gleelus' hands, which boasted thin skin between the fingers, allowed him to move through the ocean with unparalleled speed and dexterity. He used these same abilities to navigate the chaotic scene before him. As the mermans floated through the ruins of the manor, the guards watched with a mix of curiosity and trepidation, unsure of what to make of these powerful mermen's elders who had arrived so suddenly. They whispered amongst themselves, discussing the oddity of the situation and speculating about the identity and motives of the mysterious stranger who had attacked the manor just hours before. The moment Gleelus landed on the ground, his sharp eyes scanned the ruined manor, taking in the destruction that had been wrought. The wall with the ominous message in blood caught his attention, and his eyes furrowed in confusion and concern. The mermans who had accompanied Gleelus shared his shocked expression, their fish-like mouths agape as they looked upon the scene before them. Slowly, Gleelus floated over to the wall, studying the message written in blood with a sense of growing unease. "I know whoever took him will read this message," Gleelus read aloud, his voice low and grave. "So if you are the one responsible for taking him, you have a full day to return him to where you took him. If you fail to do so, this will be only the start of the destruction that's going to fall upon your world." The mermans murmured amongst themselves, their thin-skinned fingers ringing nervously. "What does this mean?" one of them asked, looking to Gleelus for answers. "It means trouble," Gleelus replied, his large eyes narrowing. "This message is a threat, and whoever wrote it is not to be taken lightly." The group fell silent, the weight of the threat hanging heavily in the air. They knew they had to act quickly to find the missing spirit child and prevent further destruction from befalling their world. Gleelus stood there in silence, his gaze fixed on the blood message on the wall. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had heard rumors about the Dark Lord's power but never expected him to be this ruthless. The mere thought of what the Dark Lord could do to their world sent shivers down Gleelus' spine. He knew that the kidnapping of the spirit child was a grave mistake, but he never thought it would lead to this. As he looked around at the destroyed manor, he could see the physical and emotional damage the attack had caused. The guards were shaken and their wounds would heal, but the trauma they had experienced would stay with them for a long time. Gleelus knew that the Dark Lord could have easily killed them all, but he had left them alive as a warning to anyone who dared to cross him. The mermans who stood around Gleelus were perplexed and worried about the situation. Their large eyes darted around as they tried to process the meaning of the message written in blood. They had no clue who could have done something so heinous and why they would kidnap the spirit child. The merman who had spoken to Gleelus was clearly agitated and demanded answers. "Lord Gleelus, who could have done this? This message makes no sense." The merman's fish-like mouth gaped open in confusion and frustration. Gleelus remained silent for a moment, lost in his own thoughts. He envied the merman's innocence, for they had no knowledge of the Dark Lord or the prophecy that had been foretold. He wished he could be like them, free from the burden of knowing what was to come. When he recalled how they had eliminated Eric, Gleelus felt a twinge of guilt and regret. He had been a loyal servant of the sea folk, and his death was a necessary sacrifice to keep the secrets of the Shark Medallion safe. But Gleelis couldn't help but wonder if there was another way. He couldn't shake off the feeling that they were becoming more like the Dark Lord in their methods. But he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the present situation. He turned to the guard who had asked him the question and spoke in a serious tone. "We don't know who the attacker is yet, but we must find him before it's too late. And we must be careful not to jump to conclusions or make assumptions." As Gleelis and his men were investigating the manor, another group arrived at the scene. But this time they weren't mermans but wraiths. Gleelis quickly identified them, despite their shape-shifting abilities, as their distinct features gave them away. The wraiths had long, sleek bodies that seemed to move with a fluid grace. Their eyes were large and unblinking, and their skin had a slight iridescent sheen that shimmered in the light. Among the group of wraiths stood a sturdy man with a muscular body, a thick beard and long black hair. He wore luxurious robes that were embroidered with intricate designs and radiated a powerful aura, making it clear that he was a leader among the wraiths. Mutrad was also present among the wraiths, standing slightly behind their leader. Mutrad stood amidst the ruins, his mind racing as he took in the devastation before him. Memories of the destroyed Ithalan island flooded his thoughts, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He had joined forces with the Dark Lord to prevent his own world from suffering a similar fate, but now it seemed like that fate might be inevitable. The fear that gripped Mutrad was palpable. His hands trembled as he tried to steady himself, and his heart felt like it was about to burst out of his chest. He had never felt this level of dread before. The thought of the Dark Lord turning his wrath towards his own world was almost too much to bear. As he surveyed the scene, he couldn't help but wonder who had taken the spirit child. Was it someone from his world? If so, the consequences would be catastrophic. The Dark Lord would stop at nothing to find the child, and those who stood in his way would face unimaginable horrors. Mutrad knew that he had to act fast. He needed to find out who was responsible for this before it was too late. But even as he made plans in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling of shock and terror that had taken hold of him. Gleelis surveyed Valen with a stern expression, his eyes probing the other man's intentions. Valen, a tall man with a sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes, held his gaze steady. As Gleelis and Valen stood facing each other, the atmosphere was tense. Valen's posture was rigid, his expression inscrutable, while Gleelis' face was etched with anger, his voice dripping with iciness. "What gives you the right to be here?" Gleelis demanded, his eyes flashing. "You know this is merman territory." Valen's voice was even, betraying no emotion. "I'm here to investigate the attack just like you. And we both know who's responsible." As Gleelis saw Valen, a member of the House of Howrid, he felt a wave of contempt and hostility wash over him. He had always harbored a deep-seated hatred for the members of Howrid, and Valen's presence only served to reinforce those feelings. But as he took in the destruction around them and the message scrawled in blood, his anger was momentarily replaced by a sense of fear and urgency. Valen, on the other hand, remained calm and composed. He knew that the members of Gladrath and Howrid had a long-standing feud, but he had put his loyalty to his house aside in the face of a greater threat. He was focused on finding the one responsible for the destruction and stopping them before it was too late. Despite their mutual animosity, Gleelis and Valen acknowledged each other with a nod of their heads, a silent recognition that they both had a common goal. Gleelis' cold tone reflected his discomfort at working with someone from Howrid, but he knew that they couldn't afford to let their differences stand in the way. Meanwhile, Valen spoke with a level-headedness that betrayed no hint of resentment towards Gladrath. Both men knew that their collaboration was necessary if they were to have any chance of catching the Dark Lord, and as they set off together to investigate the source of the destruction, they put their differences aside and focused on the task at hand. The message on the wall was written in blood, a clear sign of the Dark Lord's involvement. Gleelis' eyes darted to the message before returning to Valen. Despite their animosity towards each other, they both knew that they needed to work together if they had any hope of stopping the Dark Lord. "You're right," Gleelis conceded after a moment's pause. "But we need to find out quickly. If his attention is truly on this world, we're all in danger." Valen locked eyes with Gleelis, his intense gaze almost tangible. "I concur. It's unlikely we'll discover anything of value here. Let's convene at the Coral Crown and share all the information we have on him," he stated succinctly. Valen was a man of few words and preferred to cut to the chase. Chapter 899. The Missing Emerald Scepter. Valen's meeting with Gleelis was intense, with both men exchanging information about the Dark Lord. Valen revealed that his family had learned that the Dark Lord was responsible for slaughtering hundreds of soldiers during his war with Ithilin, leaving Gleelis feeling uneasy about the task ahead. After their conversation, Valen made his way back to the Empire of Arctic Hall. Just like the city of Serpent Hall, Arctic Hall was a glistening underwater city that sparkled like a diamond in the depths of the sea. The city was composed of towering spires and elegant domed buildings that rose out of the ocean floor, each one more exquisite than the last. As Valen made his way back to the city, the energy shield surrounding it slowly began to dim, revealing the bustling metropolis within. The streets were alive with the sounds of wraiths, the primary residents of Arctic Hall, as they went about their daily business. The glow of the city's lights cast a warm, inviting glow across the ocean floor, drawing Valen ever closer to his destination. The architecture of Arctic Hall was breathtaking, with each building more impressive than the last. The wraiths who lived there had created a city that was truly awe-inspiring in its beauty and majesty. As Valen passed through the city shield, he was greeted by the sight of wraiths bustling about their daily routines. Some of them floated effortlessly above the ground, their shimmering forms almost ethereal in the glow of the city's lights, while others walked upright on 2 feet, their skin bearing a translucent quality that shone in the light. Despite the impressive surroundings, Valen's thoughts remained on the task ahead. He knew that the Dark Lord posed a grave threat to the peace and prosperity of their world and that they needed to act quickly to prevent any further damage. As he made his way back to the compound of the House of Howrid, Valen's mind was racing, trying to formulate a plan of action that would allow them to apprehend the Dark Lord before it was too late. The grand compound of the House of Howrid was a sprawling estate that spanned a vast expanse of the ocean floor. The compound was built on a series of elevated platforms, connected by a network of walkways and bridges that arced gracefully over the shimmering waters below. Each platform was adorned with elegant towers, grand halls and intricate gardens that added to the estate's grandeur. As one approached the compound, the first thing that caught the eye was the massive gate that guarded the entrance. The gate was composed of gleaming silver metal and was emblazoned with the sigil of the Howrids, a fierce dragon with wings outstretched, ready to take flight. Beyond the gate lay a grand courtyard, framed by soaring archways and lined with lush gardens. The courtyard was alive with activity, with servants hurrying to and fro, carrying out their duties with swift efficiency. The sound of fountains and waterfalls filled the air, adding to the tranquil atmosphere that pervaded the estate. The manor at the center of the House of Howard's compound was a grand and imposing structure that stood tall and proud amidst the surrounding gardens and courtyards. It was a magnificent edifice, made of polished white stone and embellished with intricate carvings and delicate filigree work that adorned every surface. The manor's architecture was a blend of different styles, with some elements harkening back to traditional styles of the Sea Realm and others incorporating modern innovations and influences from other cultures. The manor was surrounded by a wide moat, which was filled with crystal-clear water and teeming with colorful fish and aquatic life. A large drawbridge spanned the moat, providing access to the manor's main entrance, which was flanked by 2 towering statues of mythical sea creatures. As Valen and his companions made their way through the gates of the manor, the guards stationed there immediately bowed in respect. Valen turned to Mutrad and spoke firmly, "Mutrad, you have been to the Dark Lord's realm, and we are counting on you to work closely with the Gladras to come up with a solid plan to capture him. We cannot afford to fail in this mission." While Valen spoke, Mutrad stood silently, nodding his head in agreement but keeping his thoughts to himself. Unlike Valen, Mutrad knew exactly why the Dark Lord was in their world and what was at stake. He understood the gravity of the situation and knew that failing to capture the Dark Lord could mean the end of their world as they knew it. However, Mutrad also knew he could not reveal any of this information to Valen or the others. They might suspect that he was working for the Dark Lord, which could potentially ruin any chances of success. It was a risk that Mutrad was willing to take, knowing that the fate of their world hung in the balance. Despite the concern and fear that gnawed at his heart, Mutrad remained stoic and silent, determined to do whatever it took to save their world from becoming another Ithilin. Valen strode confidently towards the main hall, with Mutrad following closely behind. The path leading to the hall was guarded by 2 imposing wraiths, each standing at 7 feet tall and fully armored. They bowed respectfully as Valen approached, opening the doors to reveal the grand main hall. Mutrad couldn't help but marvel at the sight before him. The hall was grandiose, decorated with tapestries, and adorned with chandeliers that illuminated the room with a warm glow. But Mutrad's awe was quickly replaced by shock as he saw the room was filled with the house elders and guards, all with panicked expressions etched on their faces. Valen's presence seemed to bring some relief to their anxiety as they all quickly stood up and bowed respectfully. "My lord," they said in unison, their voices echoing across the grand hall. Valen nodded in acknowledgement and turned to Mutrad. "I sense something is amiss," he said in a low voice, prompting Mutrad to tense up. "Yes, my lord," Mutrad replied hesitantly, his gaze scanning the room for any signs of danger. He couldn't help but feel a knot forming in his stomach. Something was not right and he couldn't shake the feeling that something dire had happened. Upon Valen's entry into the main hall, the elders rushed towards him with fear etched on their faces. Mutrad's heart sank, sensing that something was terribly wrong. "My lord." One of the gray-haired wraith with pointy ears stuttered, catching Valen's attention. "What happened?" he demanded, sensing the panic in the room. A moment of silence followed, and Mutrad could see the elders looking at each other nervously and sweating. Valen's impatience grew, and he could feel the anger starting to boil within him. The pointy-eared elder finally found the courage to answer. "My lord, the Emerald Scepter, it's gone," the elder stuttered. Mutrad couldn't believe what he had just heard. He watched as Valen's anger quickly turned to shock, and he darted towards the elder. He grabbed him by the neck and a powerful aura shot out of him, almost knocking everyone down to the ground. The elder managed to stutter out, "It's gone, my lord," sweat dripping down his forehead. Mutrad watched in horror as Valen's grip tightened around the elder's neck. He knew that the Emerald Scepter was an artifact that the House of Haurid had been protecting for centuries. It was said to possess immense power and was one of the most valuable items in their possession. Finally, Valen let go of the elder, who gasped for air, and turned to face the other elders. "How could this happen?" he demanded, his voice laced with disbelief and anger. The elders looked at each other, their expressions a mix of fear and shame. "We don't know, my lord," one of them finally spoke up. It was there one moment and the next it was gone. The atmosphere in the grand hall was thick with tension and disbelief as the news of the Emerald Scepter's disappearance sank in, with everyone standing in stunned silence, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. The Emerald Scepter was not just any artifact, it was one of 3 artifacts that had been forged when the Arctic Hall was created. Each of the 3 houses, the House of Haurid, the House of Gladrath, and the House of Big Mag, had been entrusted with one artifact, making them an integral part of the Arctic Hall. But now, with the Emerald Scepter missing, the House of Haurid's position in the Arctic Hall was in jeopardy. If they were unable to recover the artifact, they could face exile and the wrath of the higher elders of the Arctic Hall. The consequences of their failure were dire, and everyone in the room knew it. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air as Valen looked around the room, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. He had always known the importance of the Emerald Scepter, but now the gravity of its loss was sinking in. "How could this happen?" Valen demanded, his voice laced with frustration and disbelief. No one had an answer. The elders looked at each other nervously, their faces paling at the thought of the repercussions of their failure. Mutrad couldn't help but feel a sense of despair wash over him. They needed to find the artifact and quickly, or the House of Haurid and the Arctic Hall would be in jeopardy. The atmosphere in the Grand Hall was thick with tension and disbelief as the news of the Emerald Scepter's disappearance sank in. The artifact was not only a powerful item that the House of Haurid had been safeguarding for generations, but it was also an integral part of Arctic Hall's existence. Mutrad knew the gravity of the situation as he watched the elders and guards exchange glances of shock and horror. The Emerald Scepter was one of 3 artifacts that were forged when Arctic Hall was created. Each of the 3 ruling houses, House of Haurid, House of Gladrath, and House of Big Mag, was entrusted with one artifact, and together they symbolized the unbreakable bond between the 3 houses that made up the great underwater city. Losing the Emerald Scepter not only meant losing a valuable and powerful artifact, but it also meant jeopardizing the House of Haurid's place in the Arctic Hall. The thought of being exiled from Arctic Hall and facing the wrath of the higher elders was enough to make Mutrad's blood run cold. The loss of the Emerald Scepter was a grave matter that required immediate action. He could see Valen's mind racing as he tried to figure out what had happened and who could have taken it. Mutrad knew that finding the artifact was crucial not only for the House of Haurid but for the entire Arctic Hall. Valen's voice was still fragile as he spoke. "I need to see it with my own eyes." He walked through the crowd of stunned elders and guards, making his way to the end of the Grand Hall. There, he faced a wall of glass that looked out into an empty ocean void of any life forms. Valen placed his hand on the glass, and magical runes glowed as a golden bubble appeared in the empty ocean. As he stared at the empty bubble, Valen couldn't help but shiver. The bubble was supposed to contain the Emerald Scepter, one of the most powerful artifacts the House of Howrid had been protecting for centuries. It was hard to believe that it was gone. Valen examined the area around the bubble, and his eyes widened in shock. Powerful arrays and runes were placed all around the bubble, and a giant was guarding it. How could someone have stolen the Emerald Scepter with all of these protections in place? Valen turned to face the elders, his voice laced with anger and disbelief. How could this happen? Who is responsible for this? He demanded. The elders looked at each other, their expressions filled with fear and uncertainty. None of them could provide an answer. The Emerald Scepter was not only a valuable artifact, but it was also a symbol of their connection to the Arctic Hall. Losing it could mean being exiled from the hall and facing the wrath of the higher elders. Valen's shock was quickly replaced by an overwhelming fury, and he slammed his fist into the glass with a force that nearly shattered it into pieces. The room was filled with a deafening crack, and everyone could feel the vibrations pulsating through the air. The elders were frozen in fear, not daring to move as Valen's murderous aura engulfed the room. The air was thick with tension, and even breathing felt like a difficult task under the weight of his anger. As Valen turned to face the elders, his eyes blazed with fury, and his voice was low and menacing. "Whoever is responsible for this will face the full wrath of the House of Howrid," he growled, his words like a death sentence. The elders trembled, many of them dropping to their knees as if an invisible mountain had just fallen on their shoulders. They knew that Valen's wrath was not to be taken lightly, and the consequences of losing the Emerald Scepter could be dire for them all. The silence in the hall was finally broken by one of the elders. "My lord, it must be the Dark Lord," he said, his voice quivering with fear. The others nodded in agreement, their faces filled with dread. Before Valen had arrived, they had all come to the conclusion that the Dark Lord was responsible for taking the scepter. After all, he was known for his desire for power and his disregard for the lives of others. But to Mutrad it didn't add up. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the work of the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord was here to find the Spirit Child and had no reason to take their artifact. He had no interest in the power the scepter held. "My lord," Mutrad spoke up, drawing Valen's attention. "With all due respect, I don't think it was the Dark Lord." Mutrad had to speak up and stop the elders and Valen from pursuing the Dark Lord. Mutrad felt a sense of urgency as he watched Valen and the elders jump to the conclusion that the Dark Lord was responsible for the theft of the Emerald Scepter. Despite Valen's order to work with the Gladrath to find the Dark Lord, Mutrad knew that revealing the Dark Lord's true mission could have disastrous consequences. If the entire House of Howrid believed that the Dark Lord was the culprit and pursued him without investigating the actual thief, it would lead to chaos and destruction. Mutrad knew he had to speak up and stop them from making a costly mistake. The other elders looked at Mutrad with surprise and disbelief. "What do you mean?" one of them asked. Without paying heed to the panicking elder, Mutrad held Valen's gaze firmly. "My lord, consider this," he began, his voice low and measured. "The Dark Lord left a message in blood, indicating that he's here to search for someone. If that's the case, why would he risk stealing the scepter without even knowing if it's the item he needs? Moreover, the location of the scepter was only known to a handful of people, including us. It simply doesn't make sense." Valen's expression softened slightly as he pondered over Mutrad's words. It was true that the Dark Lord's actions seemed inconsistent with his goal. But who else could have taken the scepter? Chapter 900, Underwater Slaughter. In the Sea Realm, the absence of a sun made it impossible to have a day and night cycle like the one experienced in the realm above. However, the ingenious energy domes surrounding the empires had a remarkable feature that simulated a semblance of day and night. As the glow of the energy dome dimmed, the entire city came alive with shimmering luminescent orbs that emitted a captivating radiance. After concluding his discussion with Valen, Mutrad bid his personal guards farewell and embarked on a journey to the Sea Serpent Hall. Instead of venturing into the buildings within the energy shield, he chose to explore the vast open underwater landscape. The tranquil and serene environment, with its crystal-clear waters and an endless expanse of flora and fauna, was a feast for his eyes. As he moved through the cool waters, Mutrad was mesmerized by the kaleidoscope of colors that greeted him at every turn. Schools of brightly colored fish darted around him while delicate coral formations swayed gently in the currents. The majestic Sea Serpent Hall loomed in the distance, its imposing structure a testament to the ingenuity and craftsmanship of the Sedwelling inhabitants. Silent and swift, Mutrad navigated the murky waters of the ocean depths until he came upon a spectacular coral formation. The soft glow of bioluminescent fish flickered around him, illuminating his path. As he drew near, a hidden cabin within the massive coral structure came into view. It was Mutrad's secret sanctuary, known to no one but himself. Casting a watchful eye around him, Mutrad approached the cabin with slow and deliberate steps. He paused before the door, checking for any signs of danger before tentatively knocking. The sound echoed eerily through the underwater silence, and to his surprise the door creaked open on its own, revealing the dimly lit interior of his hidden refuge. As Mutrad cautiously stepped inside the cabin, he was immediately enveloped in darkness. The only source of light was a small, flickering candle on a rickety old table. The air was musty and filled with the scent of dampness and decay. The sound of water droplets could be heard echoing through the hollow space, a reminder of their deep underwater location. Mutrad's eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, and he saw the Dark Lord sitting before a large marble table. The table was covered with an array of strange contraptions that emitted an eerie glow, casting shadows that danced ominously on the walls. Upon entering the dimly lit cabin, a sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind him, sealing him inside with the Dark Lord. The flickering candle cast eerie shadows across the room, illuminating strange contraptions scattered across the marble table before the Dark Lord. Mutrad could feel the cold, thick aura emanating from the Dark Lord, sending shivers down his spine. The Dark Lord's upper body was bare, revealing scars and battle marks etched across his muscular frame. He continued to fiddle with the strange devices, paying no attention to Mutrad's arrival. Slowly and cautiously, Mutrad inched his way closer to the intimidating figure before him. The spider hanging from Mutrad's chain quivered with unease, its 8 legs wriggling in agitation. From the spider, the Dark Lord had seen everything that Mutrad had seen, including Valen's conversation with Gleelis and the theft of the Emerald Scepter. Powerful magic was at play in the theft of the scepter. The Dark Lord's voice was calm yet commanding, filling the silent cabin. Mutrad was taken aback by the Dark Lord's words, wondering how he knew about the use of magic. Suddenly, the quivering spider reminded him that he was always being watched. A sinister chill filled the cabin as the Dark Lord's voice grew colder. The flickering candles intensified, casting a haunting glow across the room as strange, thick darkness enveloped them. Such powerful magic can only be achieved by spilling the blood of a truly powerful being, the Dark Lord's voice echoed menacingly. Mutrad's heart pounded in his chest as he asked, "Do you mean the spirit child?" The Dark Lord simply nodded in response, his eyes fixated on the strange contraptions before him. "You may not be the only one who has lost their artifact. Investigate both the Gladrath and Big Mag houses to see if they too have suffered a similar loss. The one who still possesses their artifact likely stole the others," advised the Dark Lord with a sharp gaze. Mutrad stood there, stunned by the Dark Lord's revelation. As he tried to wrap his head around the situation, the Dark Lord flicked his wrists, summoning 2 dark swords from the shadows. They flew through the air before landing on the marble table with a clang. The Dark Lord picked up a sharpening stone and began to brush it expertly against one of the blades, causing crimson-red lightning bolts to dance and crackle along the black surface. Despite the impressive display, Mutrad couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The cabin was oppressively silent, except for the sharpening stone's sound against the blade. The Dark Lord seemed to be waiting for something, and Mutrad's nerves began to prickle with anxiety. Mutrad was taken aback by the Dark Lord's statement. "That cannot be possible, Ghost. The artifacts are protected by giants. It is impossible for someone to take them without alerting the Guardians," Mutrad argued, his voice laced with concern. He couldn't bring himself to address the Dark Lord by his title, especially when he was so disturbed by what he had just heard. The Dark Lord remained unperturbed. "Yet someone did," he replied calmly. Mutrad could feel his unease growing. The cabin was eerily silent, with only the sound of the Dark Lord sharpening his blade breaking the stillness. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. "I suspect it's either the House Gladrath or the House Big Mag who took the artifact. You didn't agree to serve me out of loyalty but to save your world. So, I'll give you a chance to find out who took the artifact," Ghost said. Mutrad stood still, his mind racing with the weight of the Dark Lord's words. The silence in the cabin was heavy and suffocating, and Mutrad knew that the Dark Lord was not finished speaking. "Whoever took the artifacts has Harry," the Dark Lord's voice dripped with killing intent, sending shivers down Mutrad's spine. "If you find them before I do, you will save countless lives. Lives that you have sworn to protect." The Dark Lord's eyes bore into Mutrad's, and he could feel the pressure of the task that had been bestowed upon him. The Dark Lord set down his sharpening stone and began to strap on the various contraptions scattered across the table. Mutrad watched in awe as the Dark Lord first fastened on a black bracer etched with intricate silver markings, the Mark III grappling hook. Next he slid on a black wrist bracelet, the APD, with a faint sound of needles piercing flesh. Mutrad shuddered at the thought of what it must be doing to the Dark Lord's arm. Finally, the Dark Lord selected a larger wrist bracelet, the Olympus, which resembled a wristwatch with a hole in the center to hold an arch-energy crystal. Mutrad knew better than to ask questions and simply observed in silence as the Dark Lord prepared himself for whatever lay ahead. Mutrad's eyes widened as he watched the Dark Lord prepare for battle. The sound of clanking metal filled the air as the Dark Lord rose from his chair, his dark armor wrapping around him like a second skin. With a swift motion, he sheathed his dark swords on his back, ready for whatever was to come. "What's happening?" Mutrad couldn't help but ask, his voice trembling with fear. The Dark Lord cracked his neck, a low growl escaping his lips. He didn't answer Mutrad's question, but the sudden presence of several powerful beings in the room made it clear that danger was near. The cabin shook violently as the powerful beings appeared, causing Mutrad to stumble. Panic set in as he realized he couldn't be seen with the Dark Lord. But before he could even voice his concerns, the Dark Lord simply snapped his fingers, and the flickering candle was snuffed out, plunging the room into complete darkness. Mutrad's heart raced with fear as he heard the sounds of the powerful beings drawing closer. "How did they find this place?" he asked the Dark Lord in a trembling voice. The Dark Lord turned to him with a cold gaze. "You should choose your confidants more carefully, Mutrad. Cowards are not to be trusted with important matters," he sneered. As the Dark Lord spoke those words, Mutrad couldn't help but think of Dylan. He was the one trusted to accompany the Dark Lord and guide him through this world. Yet the moment the fighting started with Tertiz and his group, Dylan fled from the tavern and disappeared without a trace. Mutrad could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he realized he may have made a grave mistake in placing his trust in Dylan. He was the only other person who knew about the cabin's existence and the Dark Lord's presence there. The realization hit Mutrad like a ton of bricks. Dylan had betrayed him. Mutrad's fists clenched with anger as he thought about the coward who had betrayed him in a time like this. The sense of betrayal cut deep, and Mutrad vowed to teach Dylan a lesson if he had survived the Dark Lord's wrath, although he doubted he would. "Wait!" Mutrad's attempt to stop the Dark Lord was cut short as the cabin suddenly shook violently. Before he could even finish his sentence, a deafening explosion echoed through the room, shattering everything into oblivion. Mutrad felt himself being thrown backward by the force of the blast, his body slamming against the coral walls. The world spun around him as he tried to regain his bearings, his ears ringing from the explosion. Through the smoke and debris, he could see the silhouette of the Dark Lord, standing calmly amidst the chaos. The force of the explosion knocked Mutrad off his feet, sending him tumbling through the water. As the sea water rushed in, Mutrad struggled to maintain consciousness. His vision blurred as he felt the cool embrace of the water surround him. Suddenly, a strong hand gripped his shoulder, pulling him upwards. Mutrad winced as he felt a sharp sting in his shoulder, like a needle piercing his skin. The pain quickly faded and Mutrad's vision cleared, allowing him to see his surroundings clearly. Mutrad's vision slowly cleared as he found himself floating beside the Dark Lord in the midst of the dark, endless sea. He realized with a start that a crimson-red, translucent shield surrounded them, protecting them from the crushing pressure of the deep waters. The shield shimmered with a pulsating energy, creating an eerie glow that illuminated their surroundings. Mutrad couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear as he gazed upon the shield's power, wondering how the Dark Lord managed to create such a powerful spell. As Mutrad gazed out through the crimson shield, his heart sank at the sight that greeted him. Dark, ominous figures shrouded in a thick, black mist floated menacingly in the water around them. The mist was so thick that Mutrad couldn't see their faces or even determine their race. Amidst them, he spotted 3 individuals whose aura radiated an immense and sinister power, indicating that they were at the pinnacle of the immortal stage. Their eyes burned with a fierce intensity, and their bodies rippled with otherworldly energy that made the water around them churn and boil. The group's sheer power and malevolent intent were palpable, sending shivers down Mutrad's spine. Their sole purpose seemed to be to kill the Dark Lord, and Mutrad knew that they wouldn't hesitate to crush anyone who stood in their way. Chapter 901 Underwater Slaughter. Mutrad strained his ears to listen to the whispers of the figures looming outside the protective barrier, their voices like the hissing of serpents in the darkness. He couldn't make out their features, but the way they spoke made his scales prickle with unease. These were no ordinary beings, and their intentions were clear: to slay the Dark Lord and anyone else who dared to stand in their way. Traitor! Their voices grew louder and more menacing with every repetition of the word. Mutrad couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt as he thought of his own past transgressions. Had he not served the Dark Lord in his quest for power, would he have become like these figures outside the barrier, lost in their thirst for vengeance? "We will deal with you after we slay the Dark Lord," they said in unison, their voices carrying an ominous threat. Mutrad knew that Michael was powerful, but these beings were at a whole different level of strength. It was like trying to take down a dragon with a wooden sword. But Michael was not one to be intimidated by threats. In fact, he seemed to relish the challenge. "No, you will not," Michael replied, his voice cool and collected. "You will be all fish food when I'm done with you." The figures outside the barrier let out a low, mocking chuckle. "We'll see about that," one of them growled. As Michael unsheathed his dark swords, the figures outside the barrier began to move towards them, their movements slow and deliberate in the deep, dark waters. Michael's blades glinted menacingly in the dim light, casting an eerie glow on his face. "You should have stayed in your kingdom, Landwalker," one of the figures sneered. "The sea is no place for you." Michael remained silent, his focus solely on the task at hand. He had faced many foes in his time, but never in such an unfamiliar environment. The pressure of the sea might be working against him, but the darkness strengthened him. Mutrad watched with apprehension as the figures unleashed their spells, their movements fluid and graceful in the water. He could feel the energy in the water shift, the currents growing stronger and more chaotic as the spells were cast. It was a mesmerizing and terrifying sight, as the figures seemed to be in perfect harmony with the water, bending it to their will like a master conductor leading an orchestra. Suddenly, the water around Michael erupted in a dazzling display of light and energy. Beams of energy, bolts of lightning, and explosions of fire erupted around him, illuminating the surrounding waters in a brilliant display of colors. Despite the ferocity of the spells, Michael remained calm and composed, his body moving with the fluid grace of a predator in the water. The spells collided with an invisible barrier around Michael, casting a shower of sparks and energy that crackled in the water. The impact of the spells sent shockwaves rippling through the water, distorting the surrounding currents and causing the sea floor to tremble. Michael stood firm, his dark swords drawn and at the ready. His eyes glinted with a cold, calculating light as he scanned his opponents, searching for weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The figures continued to cast spells, their movements growing more frantic as they realized that Michael was not an easy target. The onslaught of spells from the black mist figures was relentless. The responsive shield struggled to hold up against the powerful magical attacks, and Mutrad watched in horror as cracks spider-webbed across its surface. But just when it seemed like the shield was about to shatter into a million pieces, Michael acted. With a wave of his hand, Michael unleashed the death range, and the world around them was plunged into darkness. Mutrad felt the power in the air shift, and she knew that Michael had just entered the half-celestial stage. In the darkness, Michael's power was amplified, and his enemies were left vulnerable. The cracks in the shield rapidly disappeared as Michael channeled his newfound strength, and the black mist figures were momentarily caught off guard. Mutrad's eyes widened in astonishment as Michael defied the odds and dashed straight through the crimson-red shield without a second thought. Mutrad himself had been born and raised in the sea realm, and his body had adapted to the immense pressure over time. However, even he knew that the deepest parts of the sea realm were impossible to survive without proper preparation. And yet, here was Michael fearlessly fighting the black mist-covered hostiles on their own turf. Mutrad watched in amazement as the Dark Lord's movements became a blur, his swords flashing through the water with lightning speed. The pressure of the water seemed to have no effect on him as he weaved in and out of his opponent's attacks. As the black mist-covered hostiles cast their spells at Michael, Mutrad watched in awe as the spells took shape in the water. One of them cast a spell that created a whirlpool of bubbles that rushed toward Michael, trying to ensnare him. Another cast a spell that created a stream of water spears that shot toward Michael with deadly precision. Yet another created a massive wave that crashed down toward Michael, threatening to engulf him. But Michael was ready for them. With a swift movement, he unsheathed his dark swords and sliced through the spells with ease. The whirlpool of bubbles dissipated as his swords cut through it. The water spears shattered into harmless droplets as his swords passed through them. And the massive wave split in two as his swords carved a path through it. The spells cast by the hostiles were specifically designed for underwater battles. The bubbles in the whirlpool created a disturbance in the water that made it difficult for Michael to move. The water spears were perfect for piercing through the water and hitting a moving target, while the wave was meant to be an overwhelming force that could crush any opponent. Despite the formidable nature of the spells, Michael was able to cut through them with ease. His dark swords were specially designed to cut through anything, including spell or magic, and he had honed his skills to perfection. When Michael wielded the dark swords, they emitted a menacing glow that illuminated the dark waters. The swords were encased in a fierce aura of crimson-red lightning, crackling and surging around them like miniature bolts of energy. Michael deftly sliced through the spells cast by his opponents while the lightning around the swords intensified, illuminating the area around him with flashes of red light. The water around him seemed to distort and warp in the wake of the sword's movements, as though the energy of the lightning was warping the very fabric of reality. The dark swords themselves appeared almost alive in Michael's hands, writhing and twisting as though they were eager to slice through anything in their path. Their edges were razor-sharp, glinting ominously in the red light of the lightning surrounding them. Michael cut through the spells cast by his opponents with ease, as if he and the dark swords were one, moving in perfect unison to slice through the threatening magic. His opponent's powerful spells had no effect on him as he remained unfazed, confident, and skillfully maneuvering through the underwater battle. The spells cast by Michael's opponents created brilliant flashes of light that illuminated the surrounding waters. Still, they were no match for the all-encompassing darkness that blanketed the ocean depths. In fact, the more the light shone, the more the darkness seemed to grow, as if it were feeding off the energy released by the spells. And as the darkness intensified, so did Michael's power. His body seemed to absorb the darkness like a sponge, and with each passing moment he became more formidable, more invincible. It was as if the darkness was a part of him, empowering him to effortlessly slice through the spells that threatened him and the dark swords that crackled with crimson-red lightning. After effortlessly cutting through the spells, Michael locked his intense gaze on one of the half-immortals among the group. His eyes began to glow with a fierce intensity, as he summoned a dark energy from within. The energy flowed through his body and concentrated in his eyes, which then emitted two laser-like black beams that shot through the water with incredible speed. The beams were so powerful that they vaporized the surrounding water, creating a momentary cloud of steam, and penetrated the figure through the black mist. The half-immortal screamed in agony as the beams burned through their body, leaving the half-immortal in pure agony. The half-immortal's screams of pain echoed through the water, but it was abruptly silenced as Michael dashed towards him. The black mist surrounding the figure did nothing to slow Michael down as he swung his dark swords with deadly precision. The swords sliced through the water with ease, leaving behind a trail of crackling red lightning. In a split second, Michael's swords made contact with the half-immortal's neck. The blades cut through the water and through the figure's neck like a hot knife through butter, sending his head flying off his shoulders. The surrounding water turned red as blood mixed with the ocean, creating an eerie atmosphere. Michael stood there, his body pulsing with power as he watched the half-immortal's headless body drift away. The other figures watched in shock and fear, realizing that they were facing a truly formidable opponent. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a half-immortal level 8 warrior. The reward is 1 million experience points and 20,000 badass points. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully being a badass. The reward is 15,000 badass points. Upon killing one of the 8 enemies, Michael heard the notification from the system ringing in his head. He ignored the system notification and focused on the task at hand. Use the light, bellowed one of the immortals, his voice carrying a commanding tone that left no room for argument. Without hesitation, the others followed suit, their hands raised towards the darkness that surrounded them. Suddenly, a brilliant orb of light materialized, pulsating with an intensity that made Mutrad squint and close his eyes. The radiant light illuminated the ocean around them, revealing the eerie black mist that enveloped the hostile figures. The pulsating energy emanating from the orb was so strong that Mutrad could feel the pressure increasing around him, almost suffocating him. The intense brightness from the orbs clashed with the overwhelming darkness from Michael, and the collision created an eerie grayness that engulfed the entire area. The two opposing forces seemed to be locked in a tug of war, each one striving to overcome the other. The struggle between light and darkness was so intense that Mutrad could feel the pressure building up around him, making it difficult to move. He watched in awe as the two powerful forces pushed and pulled against each other, neither one giving in. The pulsating orbs of light emitted a powerful energy that Michael could feel even from a distance. As the wielder of the dark flames, he was intimately familiar with the energy of primordial flame, but the energy emanating from the orbs was completely different, yet somehow familiar. It was as if the energy of the light orbs was the opposite of the dark flames but still connected in some way. Michael could feel the opposing forces trying to cancel each other out, but the balance between them remained fragile and uncertain. As the orbs of light pulsated with immense energy, Michael's body began to feel the strain of the opposing force. He could sense the energy from the orbs, a kind of primordial flame that was completely opposite to his own dark flames. The collision of the two energies resulted in a strange grayness that seemed to swallow everything around them. Light flames, Michael muttered, his forehead creasing with concentration. The war between the darkness of his death range and the light from the orbs was diminishing the strength of the darkness. The absence of complete darkness due to the conflict with the orbs of light had made Michael's powers not as potent as they were before. With Michael's power weakened by the presence of light flames, one of the immortal figures seized the opportunity. He swiftly conjured a ball of energy, his movements fluid and precise, while the others watched intently. The ball of energy pulsated with an intense brightness, almost blinding Mutrad's eyes. Michael was their target, and they waited expectantly to see his next move. The ball of energy, crackling with power, sliced through the water with ferocity, hurtling towards Michael. Just as it was about to strike him, the responsive shield flickered into existence around him, absorbing the spell but not completely. The remaining power of the spell struck Michael in the chest, sending him back a few inches. The force of the impact reverberated through his body, and a tiny drop of blood oozed out of the corner of his mouth, mixing with the water and creating an eerie red cloud around him. Michael smirked as he emerged from the blast, seemingly unfazed by the spell. "Is that the best you can do?" he taunted, his voice carrying through the water. The energy from the spell had hit him, sending him back a few inches, but Michael stood tall and resolute. He knew he was far more powerful than these beings who had dared to challenge him. Even with the power of the light flames on their side, they were no match for him. Chapter 902 Underwater Slaughter. The figures shrouded in mist noticed the impact of their light flames orbs on Michael's power and seized the opportunity to strike him with a barrage of spells. The first one was a beam of concentrated light that shot toward Michael like a bolt of lightning. As it hit the responsive shield around him, the beam dispersed into a shower of glowing particles that fizzled out harmlessly. Next, one of the immortals cast a spell that conjured up a whirlpool of swirling water around Michael. The current became stronger, but Michael remained unfazed, his dark swords cutting through the water with ease. Another figure raised his hand and summoned a cluster of sharp icicles, which hurtled toward Michael at a frightening speed. Michael twirled the dark swords in his hands, cutting through the icicles before they could reach him, sending shards of ice scattering around him. A fourth figure shot a stream of pressurized water toward Michael, hoping to disorient him, but it merely brushed past him without any effect. The rest of them did not cast any spells but summoned glowing swords and dashed at Michael to cut him in pieces. Their movements were swift and fluid, as they effortlessly sliced through the water with their weapons. Michael felt the pressure from the water increase as the figures closed in on him, but he remained focused on the incoming attacks. Michael unleashed a flurry of quick and precise sword strikes as the figures approached, effortlessly parrying their glowing swords with his dark blades. The sound of clashing swords echoed through the water as Michael deftly avoided their attacks and countered with his own. Despite the weight of the water pressing down on him, Michael moved with the grace and agility of a dancer, his movements almost fluid in their execution. With each strike, his opponents were pushed back, their glowing swords barely able to withstand the force of Michael's powerful swings. The water around them was churned into a frenzy, as the combatants continued their deadly dance. Finally, Michael saw an opening and took advantage of it. With a swift and powerful swing, he cut through one of the glowing swords, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. The figure who had summoned the sword was momentarily stunned, allowing Michael to move in for the finishing blow. With a quick thrust of his dark sword, he pierced through the figure's chest, and the glowing sword vanished in a burst of light. As the other figures realized their glowing swords were no match for Michael, they quickly retreated, disappearing into the murky waters to strategize their next move. One of the immortals, however, refused to back down. He cast a spell that formed a massive ice dragon in the water, its scales shimmering in the dim light. The dragon roared, sending shockwaves through the water, as it charged at Michael with terrifying speed. Michael was already being bombarded by several spells at the same time, his responsive shield struggling to absorb the onslaught of energy. As the water dragon approached, Michael raised his dark swords, ready to face the beast head-on. But the dragon was too powerful for the shield to handle, and it shattered on impact as the dragon sank its razor-sharp teeth into Michael's shoulder and chest. Blood gushed from Michael's wounds, mixing with the water and turning it a deep red. Despite the pain and the loss of his shield, Michael remained unfazed. He swung his dark swords with precision, cutting through the dragon's scales with ease. The dragon let out a deafening roar as it recoiled, its body disintegrating into nothingness. The immortal who had cast the ice dragon spell was momentarily stunned by the ease with which Michael dispatched the creature. However, their victory was short-lived as the Dark Lord turned his pitch-black eyes towards the pulsating orbs of light that floated around them in the water. A sense of dread crept over the figures as they realized what was coming. Protect the orbs. The immortals watched in horror as Michael's dark beams shot out of his eyes and shattered the glass caging the light flames orbs within. The orbs exploded in a burst of bright light, momentarily blinding the immortals and illuminating the surrounding water. But as soon as the light faded, the orbs were gone. In a swift motion, Michael moved through the water, his dark beams firing with deadly accuracy to destroy the orbs in the distance. He swung his dark swords with expert precision, slicing through the orbs that floated closer to him. Each orb shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, its light extinguished forever. The water around them started to turn darker once again. Since Michael was focused on destroying the orbs, some of the spells and sword attacks managed to get him. The black mist-covered figures managed to cut Michael several times, their glowing swords slicing through his flesh with ease. But the APD, the potion and pill dispenser that the Dark Lord wore around his wrist, sprang into action, injecting a potent healing potion into Michael's bloodstream. Despite the pain that racked his body, Michael fought on, his face a mask of determination. As the battle raged on, the immortals launched one spell after another, bombarding Michael with powerful attacks that would have felled any other warrior. But Michael's APD kept injecting him with healing potions, allowing him to withstand the onslaught. The pain was excruciating, but Michael refused to let it show. Despite the spells and attacks, Michael fought on, his dark swords flashing as he sliced through the glowing swords of his opponents. His eyes blazed with an otherworldly light as he fired dark beams from his gaze, obliterating the orbs of light that surrounded them. Each blow he struck was more ferocious than the last, his strength fueled by a burning desire to see the battle through to its conclusion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Michael destroyed the last of the light flame orbs. With a triumphant roar, he turned to face his opponents, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. Though battered and bloodied, Michael knew the battle was far from over. But with the light flames extinguished, his power once again reached the half-celestial stage. Did you really think these puny light orbs would give you an advantage over me? Michael scoffed, his wounds healing quickly thanks to the APD injecting healing potions into his bloodstream. Cuts and bruises on his body slowly faded away as he stood amidst the darkness that surrounded them. The immortals moved away from Michael, their confidence was shaken by his words and the strength he possessed. But Michael knew the battle could have ended much sooner if they weren't fighting underwater, where the pressure was restricting his movements and limiting his abilities. And those spells you cast? Michael continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. They may have looked ordinary, but they were all epic-level spells. You really know how to put on a show, don't you? Despite the pain he felt, Michael remained composed and focused on the task at hand. He knew he had to adapt to the underwater environment and overcome the challenge posed by the light orbs. With each passing moment, the darkness around him grew stronger, boosting his power and giving him an edge over his opponents. The complete darkness of the death range enveloped the area, and Michael rose to the half-celestial stage once again, just as he had been before the light orbs had interrupted his power. Prepare yourselves to witness the true power gap between us. Michael's voice boomed in the utter darkness, sending chills down their spines. Mutrad, who had been observing the battle from a safe distance, felt the pressure around him increase as he braced for what was to come. The remaining immortals and their half-immortal underlings frantically tried to cast their strongest spells, but they had no idea what was about to hit them. Suddenly, the water around them began to boil due to the intense heat emanating from the Dark Lord, while the ear-deafening crackling of lightning filled the air. As if that wasn't enough, the water began to swirl around them, forming a powerful vortex that threatened to crush them from all sides. As the darkness intensified, the two immortals could feel the water moving around them, and an eerie silence descended upon the scene. Suddenly they felt a sharp pain in their throats as if a hot blade had been thrust through them. They tried to speak, but their voices were choked by the presence of a dark sword piercing through their necks. Blood oozed out of the wounds, staining the water around them, but in the pitch-black darkness, no one could see the blood or the dark swords. Just then, a half-immortal summoned a swarm of glowing piranhas, hoping to illuminate the Dark Lord floating behind the immortals for a moment. But their hopes were short-lived, as the darkness enveloped the swarm of piranhas like an invisible hand and crushed them into oblivion, leaving the half-immortals stunned and defenseless. When Michael unleashed the ring of fire, the water around them began to heat up, and the half-immortals felt their skin start to melt. Despite being underwater, Michael's ring of fire burned with such intensity that it melted through the half-immortal's skin. The black mist surrounding them was no match for the power of the dark flames. While the half-immortals writhed in agony, the dark beams shot through the water like two bolts of lightning, penetrating their chests. They gasped in pain as they felt a strong surge of water around them. Before they could even begin to defend themselves, they felt a sharp pain in their necks as Michael delivered the final blow. The water around them churned violently as the half-immortals' lifeless bodies sank to the ocean floor. Michael, now the victor of the underwater battle, let out a triumphant laugh as the darkness began to recede. As the darkness faded away, Mutrad's eyes widened in shock as he saw the Dark Lord floating in the water, his body unscathed despite the intense battle that had just taken place. The bodies of the defeated foes slowly sank to the ocean floor, a silent testament to the power of the Dark Lord. The water around them glowed with an eerie light, the residue of the spells and attacks that had been exchanged. Mutrad couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as he looked around, wondering what impact their battle had on the delicate ecosystem of the ocean. The thought of the potential devastation sent shivers down his spine. Just when Mutrad thought the battle was over, the Dark Lord turned his gaze towards him and disappeared from his sight in a blur of motion. Mutrad stood there, stunned, with 1,000 questions racing through his mind. A few moments later, the Dark Lord reappeared at the spot where he had slain the immortals and half-immortals, an earthen struggling and squirming in his hand. Despite its feeble attempts to escape, the Dark Lord tightened his grip around the earthen's neck, raising it up as his menacing eyes glinted in the dim light. Mutrad could feel the intensity of the Dark Lord's rage and power emanating from him, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of fear and awe in his presence. Mutrad noticed the glowing icy blue crystal in the earthen's hand as he approached. The Dark Lord's gaze also fell upon the crystal, and he swiftly snatched it away from the creature's grasp. The crystal shimmered in his palm as he infused it with a sliver of energy, bringing the recorded battle to life. Watching the playback of the intense underwater battle, Mutrad felt a sense of awe at the power that was displayed. The crystal captured every moment of the battle in vivid detail, from the clash of spells to the fierce sword fights. It was as if they were reliving the battle in real time, only with a clearer view of the action. Intriguing. Now who hired you? The Dark Lord questioned with a chilling tone. Chapter 903 New Plague called the Red Bliss. 5 days later, Alicia stood in a grand hall, the walls adorned with intricate tapestries and golden chandeliers illuminating the space. In the center of the room, a round table sat, surrounded by a menagerie of individuals. A towering figure with fur and a lion-like head sat at the head of the table, his piercing eyes surveying the room. An elven woman with cascading blonde hair sat across from him, her features sharp and ethereal. In the center of the table, a delicately carved glass bottle stood, its glistening red contents catching the light and casting an otherworldly glow over the faces of those gathered. The atmosphere in the room was charged with anticipation, and Alicia could feel the weight of the room's purpose settling on her shoulders. Her words finally broke the tense silence in the room. "Gentlemen," Alicia began, her tone serious and commanding, "I bring to your attention the new highly addictive brew that has been flooding the markets in Elon and Azair. It was first introduced to patrons in various taverns for free, but now it's being sold for a minimum of 4,000 coins, which is 4 times the price of dwarven ale. This brew is no ordinary drink and we need to take action before it spreads like a plague throughout the realm. As much as I am shocked by the horrendous price," the lion-headed man snickered, "I can't help but think, why do we bother ourselves with what the nobles drink? If they want to drink this, they can. It's their choice. We guardians certainly have better things to worry about than some drink." Alicia couldn't help but feel a tinge of annoyance at his dismissive attitude towards the addictive brew that was causing chaos in Elon and Azair. But her focus quickly shifted to the new Alpha Guardian of the Hunter Guardians, Ilara Vauren, as she listened intently to the discussion. The Vauren family was no stranger to the position of Alpha Guardian, as Ilara's predecessor, Tenulia Vauren, had held the title before her untimely demise at the hands of the Dark Lord. After the brutal massacre of the Hunter Guardians and the devastating crash of Tenulia's warship into the guild headquarters, no one was willing to take up the mantle of Alpha Guardian. But to everyone's surprise, Ilara stepped forward, ready to lead the charge against the Dark Lord and his minions. Unlike her predecessor, Ilara was cunning, patient, and breathtakingly beautiful. Her lethal combination of brains and beauty made her a formidable opponent, and though she did not openly vow vengeance against the Dark Lord, everyone knew that when the time came she would be the first to strike him down. As for Ilara, she remained silent and observed the discussion with a keen eye. Her elegant features betrayed no emotion, but everyone in the room knew that beneath her calm demeanor lay a fierce determination. Ilara was a Vauran, after all, and the blood of the great warrior family ran strong in her veins. When Ilara finally spoke, her voice was cool and measured. "We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to this issue. The addiction caused by this brew is not just harming individuals but also affecting their families and communities. We must take action to prevent further harm." As the discussion continued, it became clear that Ilara's words held weight. Her leadership and strategic thinking had already earned her the respect of many, and it was no surprise that she had risen to the position of Alpha Guardian. Alicia nodded in agreement with Ilara's words, and it seemed that many others in the room shared her sentiment. Even the lion-headed man seemed to be reconsidering his dismissive attitude toward the issue. "My team has informed me that some nobles are willing to pay up to 10,000 for a single bottle of this so-called red bliss," Alicia said, her voice ringing out clearly in the hall. "And within just a week of its appearance, many young nobles have become addicted to it. They're neglecting their studies and cultivation, instead frantically scouring the kingdoms for a bottle and drinking it all day long." A murmur of concern rippled through the room as the gravity of the situation became clear. "This is a threat not just to individuals but to entire communities," Ilara spoke up, her voice firm and resolute. "If we do not take action to prevent the spread of this addiction, it will only continue to grow and cause more harm." Alicia nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning the room once more. "Many sects have been discussing putting a ban on the bottle, but we must act quickly and decisively if we hope to curb the addiction before it's too late." The Guardians exchanged worried glances, the weight of the situation heavy on their shoulders. But as always, they remained steadfast in their duty to protect and serve. Alicia stood tall in the center of the brightly lit hall, her eyes piercing through the crowd of council members gathered around the round table. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice commanding attention. "As I investigated the source of this new brew, I discovered that the official distributor of the highly addictive Red Bliss is none other than the Phoenix Manor," she said, her words ringing out with a sharp edge. The council members exchanged worried glances and murmurs began to spread throughout the room. Alicia's information was not to be taken lightly. "But there's more," Alicia continued, a hint of satisfaction creeping into her tone. "The Phoenix Manor began distributing these bottles only after the disappearance of Lord Julius." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Alicia in anticipation of what she would reveal next. She savored the moment before continuing, her words calculated for maximum impact. "One of my informants inside the Phoenix Manor informed me that Lord Julius was approached by the Dark Lord's minion. It's rumored that Julius ordered the man to be hanged and 3 days later, he disappeared without a trace." The room fell silent as everyone processed Alicia's words. It was clear that she was leading them toward an uncomfortable truth. "Now, why would they do that?" Alicia continued, "if Lord Julius had no problems with the Dark Lord?" The lion-headed man scowled, his voice laced with anger. "Are you saying that the Dark Lord is behind Lord Julius' disappearance?" Alicia's eyes narrowed as she leaned forward. "I may not have concrete evidence, but it's highly likely that the Dark Lord had a hand in Lord Julius' disappearance. Consider the facts. Lord Julius refused to accept the Dark Lord's offer, and within 3 days he vanished without a trace. And then, a cunning fox by the name of Zod took his place as the distributor of Red Bliss. It seems far too coincidental to me. The Dark Lord always has his fingers in every pie, and I wouldn't be surprised if he orchestrated this whole thing to start the distribution of the Red Bliss." She crossed her arms and said. Ilara's voice rang out clear and steady. "Think you may be onto something, Alicia. It's no secret that the Dark Lord values his coins above all else. And after the Supreme Guardian shut down the Majestic and Hades, his 2 biggest sources of revenue, it's likely that he would look for new ways to fill his coffers." Alicia nodded in agreement. "Exactly. And what better way to do so than by addicting the nobles to a highly profitable substance?" Ilara paused for a moment, her piercing gaze sweeping across the room. As for Lord Julius' disappearance, I believe it is no coincidence that it occurred just as the distribution of the Red Bliss began. The Dark Lord is known for his ruthless tactics, and he would not hesitate to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and Ilara continued. Furthermore, we must not forget that the Dark Lord has always been drawn to coins and wealth. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that he saw an opportunity to profit from addiction. The weight of Ilara's words hung heavy in the air, and the room fell into contemplative silence as the gravity of the situation settled in. An end to this Red Bliss, we need real evidence. Until then, we might have to push for unofficial bans 00:17 among the sections. But even to do that, we need to have casualties. Alicia sighed deeply, the room fell into a momentary silence before the lion-headed Alpha Guardian spoke up again. If this is true, then the Dark Lord has truly sunk to new depths, he growled, his tone filled with anger and disgust. Ilara nodded in agreement. Indeed. But we cannot act without concrete proof, she said, her voice calm and measured. All eyes turned to Alicia, who seemed to be the most knowledgeable about the situation. She cleared her throat and spoke up. The merchants involved in the distribution are unlikely to admit working for the Dark Lord, but we do know that the Red Bliss is produced somewhere in the southern continent and brought to Elon and Azair through cargo ships. The lion-headed man rolled his eyes. Isn't that convenient? It's no secret who controls most of the southern continent. The Dark Lord is likely working on subduing the rest somehow, taking advantage of our weakened presence there. Ilara furrowed her brow in thought. Gathering real proof about the Red Bliss in the southern continent won't be easy, she said, but we must try. Until then, perhaps banning the Red Bliss throughout Elon and Azair like we did with the Majestic and Hades is the best course of action. We cannot, Alicia said firmly, shaking her head. As much as I would like to put a stop to everything the Dark Lord does, we have no concrete proof. The rules and laws prevent us from meddling in the affairs of the merchant guilds. If we want to put an end to this Red Bliss, we need real evidence. Until then, we might have to push for unofficial bans among the sections. But even to do that, we need to have casualties. Alicia sighed deeply, her expression troubled. Ilara's brow furrowed in concern. Casualties? Alicia nodded grimly. Yes. We need to show the severity of the situation to the people. The addiction caused by this brew is not just harming individuals but also affecting their families and communities. We need to gather evidence of the harm it's causing, even if it means some must suffer. The lion-headed Alpha Guardian snarled in anger. This is unacceptable. We can't wait around for casualties to happen before we can act. There must be another way. Ilara placed a calming hand on the Alpha Guardian's shoulder. I understand your anger, but we must act within the confines of the law. We need to gather more information and find a way to stop this distribution without causing unnecessary harm. The room fell into a tense silence as they all contemplated the gravity of the situation. The Dark Lord's insidious plans were spreading like a disease, and they needed to find a way to cut it off at the source before it consumed them all. What about the Sunrise Sect? The lion-headed Alpha Guardian of the Beast Guardians asked, his voice seething with anger. That fucker has a special connection with them. Are the disciples in the Sunrise Sect getting addicted to the Red Bliss? I'm sure they wouldn't even sell this thing in Bradford. Alicia took a deep breath and spoke. Believe it or not, some taverns are selling the Red Bliss. But fortunately, the Sunrise Sect has a law in place preventing their disciples from drinking any type of booze. This rule was enforced after seeing their one-star disciple, Ghost, who abstained from drinking. The law has been in place long before the Red Bliss came into existence. Ilara nodded her head in agreement. That makes sense. The Sunrise Sect has always been strict with their rules and discipline. The lion-headed man's eyes narrowed with anger. So, what you're saying is that the Dark Lord's plan is to use the Red Bliss to create addiction among disciples of other sects, ultimately leading to their downfall, while the Sunrise Sect remains unaffected. Alicia nodded grimly. That seems to be one of the outcomes. Ilara spoke up, her voice calm and measured. We cannot allow this to happen. We must find a way to stop the distribution of the Red Bliss before it causes irreparable damage to the other sections. The lion-headed man let out a low growl. Agreed. We need to take action and fast. We cannot let the Dark Lord win this battle. Alicia nodded in agreement. Like I said, we need to gather concrete evidence against the Phoenix Manor and their involvement with the Dark Lord. We cannot act without proof or we risk starting a war. Ilara spoke up again. We need to be careful and strategic in our approach. Let us gather information and evidence, and only then can we move forward with a plan to stop the distribution of the red bliss. Chapter 904 New Income and the Two Armor Pieces. The sky was engulfed in a tempestuous maelstrom of black clouds, illuminated by a frenzied barrage of lightning strikes. The ferocity of the storm was palpable, as heavy sheets of rain relentlessly battered the surrounding landscape, shrouding everything in a mist of swirling droplets. Amidst this chaotic scene, the ominous silhouette of the Dark Lord's towering mountain loomed ominously over the turbulent waters of the Dark Ocean. The castle, still only partially constructed, seemed to cling precariously to the sheer face of the mountain, with a sword-hilt mountain leading up to the Dark Lord's garden. The deafening roar of the waterfall cascading down the mountainside only added to the surreal atmosphere of the place. Despite the inhospitable conditions, a group of vampires dressed in the deepest shade of black could be seen darting through the air with effortless grace, their vigilant patrol never faltering, even in the midst of the raging storm. An empty hall was eerily quiet inside the castle, with only the sound of Gaia's breathing and the occasional clink of gold coins breaking the silence. The piles of gold coins glimmered and shone in the dim light, casting a warm, inviting glow on Gaia's face. Her raven-black hair was perfectly coiffed, framing her stunning features, and her bright eyes sparkled with unbridled joy. Unable to contain herself, Gaia let out a high-pitched squeal of delight and threw herself onto the stack of gold coins, letting them scatter around her like a shower of glittering rain. She rolled around in the piles of coins, her laughter filling the room as she reveled in her newfound wealth. The stack of gold coins before her contained a staggering 4.5 million gold coins, the result of just 1 week's sales of the Red Bliss. The sheer amount of wealth was overwhelming, and it was clear that business was booming for the Phoenix Manor. As Gaia was rolling around in the pile of gold coins, she couldn't help but let out a childish giggle. The glint from the gold illuminated her face, making her look almost angelic. But as Azazel appeared in the room, her expression turned serious. Azazel couldn't help but be taken aback by the sight before him. The Dark Queen, the most feared person in the Dark Castle, was playing like a child in a pile of gold coins. He cleared his throat to get her attention, and when she heard him, she immediately stopped her play and turned her gaze toward him. "Tell me everything you learned," Gaia demanded, her tone serious. After the Phoenix Manor gave out free batches of the Red Bliss to entice the nobles and sold 1,500 bottles in the first week, Gaia ordered Azazel to gather information from Sadie about how the nobles were reacting to the new brew. Azazel took a deep breath before speaking. "It seems the nobles are highly addicted to the Red Bliss, my queen. They are willing to pay up to 10,000 gold coins for a single battle after getting a taste. Many sects have started discussing putting a ban on the bottle, but it's not easy as the Phoenix Manor is the official distributor." Gaia raised an eyebrow. "And what about the kingdoms? How are they reacting?" Azazel paused for a moment before continuing. "The kingdoms are worried. They fear the addiction will distract their young nobles from their studies and cultivation. There's even talk of imposing a kingdom-wide ban, but nothing has been decided yet." Gaia nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Keep gathering information, Azazel. We need to know everything there is to know about the Red Bliss and how it's affecting the kingdoms and sects." Gaia stood up from the pile of gold coins, her expression turning serious. "Azazel, take some bottles from the next batch and send them to the ministers. We need to make sure they have a taste for the Red Bliss. Otherwise they won't hesitate to ban it," she said with a firm tone. Azazel nodded, his face betraying a hint of concern. "But what about the prices for the next batch, my lady? I've heard rumors that some taverns are plotting to hide the bottles from the nobles so they can raise the prices up to 15,000 gold coins." Gaia let out a scoff. "Those greedy fuckers. We can't let them create a void in the distribution line. If the nobles and the rich get what they want, they'll drink and won't cause problems. But if they're denied what they want, their addiction will make them do something foolish. We have to keep the crime rate from rising as much as we can, or the Guardian Guild will have a strong case for pushing the ban even harder." Azazel nodded in agreement. "They'll make sure to handle it, my lady. And what about the Guardians? What if they start to suspect something?" Gaia's eyes narrowed and she let out a humorless chuckle. "Those fools should have already suspected our involvement. But for now, we need to focus on keeping the flow of the Red Bliss steady and making sure our customers are satisfied. Any disruptions in the distribution can be disastrous for us." Azazel's crimson-red eyes glinted with bloodlust, causing Gaia to feel uneasy. It had been a long time since she had seen that side of him. As a result, the Dark Lord had ordered Azazel to control himself and meditate in order to calm his nerves, especially after the incident where he almost lost control and wreaked havoc among their enemies. Gaia knew that the demon inside Azazel was slowly awakening, and she would have to address the issue when the Dark Lord returned from the Sea Realm. Azazel's question took Gaia by surprise and she raised an eyebrow. "No need," she replied, her tone firm. "Just inform Zod about these tavern owners. He will take care of them." Gaia knew that Zod, the current leader of the Phoenix Manor, was more than capable of handling the situation. His cunning and resourcefulness had played a significant role in the success of the Red Bliss distribution thus far. Gaia also knew that Zod was loyal to them and would not hesitate to take care of any threats to their operation. Azazel nodded understanding and left the room, his bloodlust slowly subsiding. Gaia watched him go, a sense of unease still lingering in her mind. She knew that she would have to keep a close eye on Azazel in the future. Azazel bowed and left the room, leaving Gaia alone with the stack of gold coins. As she looked upon the shining pile, she couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and awe. It wasn't that Gaia had never seen such an amount before, but the fact that they had almost gone bankrupt after Noah, the Supreme Guardian, closed down the Majestic in Hades made the stack before her all the more valuable. The Dark Castle had suffered greatly from the closure of their two biggest establishments. It was only after the arrival of the Red Bliss that they had regained their financial footing. Gaia couldn't help but think how quickly fortunes could change. In a barren desert, a mere drop of water was worth more than a lake nestled in the lush hills. She reached down and scooped up a handful of coins, feeling the cool metal against her skin. The weight of them in her palm was satisfying, and she relished in the sensation. Gaia was lost in the weight of the gold coins when Azazel rushed into the room, his furrowed brow revealing the urgency of his news. "What now?" Gaia asked, her eyes fixed on the demon. "My lady," he said, "Lord Saber has made a discovery. He claims to have found not one but two pieces of the Dark Lord's armor." Gaia's eyes widened in surprise. The Dark Queen strode into the surveillance room with the aura of power emanating from her. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the vast room as she made her way toward the center. Her black cloak billowed behind her like the wings of a dark angel, and her raven-black hair was tied back into a ponytail, revealing her sharp and defined facial features. Azazel, the demon butler, stood by the entrance with his crimson-red eyes flickering with the reflection of the magical runes etched into the mirrors surrounding the room. The ambient lighting in the room was a mixture of darkness and blue, with the flickering light of orbs casting a dim glow. The dwarves were yet to finish building the surveillance room, and the dark forest still served as their main hub of surveillance. But they planned to have a better and bigger surveillance room in the Dark Castle. As soon as Gaia entered, Azazel raised his hand, and the individual mirrors, each showing a different spider feed from various parts of the castle, flickered out of existence. In their place, a single mirror formed in the center of the room, displaying Saber's face. "Greetings, my lady," Saber said with a respectful bow, his eyes locked onto hers. "You found the armor pieces?" Gaia's heart raced with anticipation as Saber's words sank in. They had been searching for the Dark Lord's armor pieces for months and now finally they had found them. She couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. "With Lord Tiberius' assistance, I was able to track down Quintus and locate the armor pieces." My lady. Gaia's eagerness was palpable as she leaned forward and asked, "Where is he?" Her mind was racing, wondering what Quintus was up to now and why he had resurfaced after all this time. Saber hesitated for a moment, his expression unreadable. Gaia could sense his hesitation and wondered what he could possibly say that would worry her. Finally Saber spoke, "He's in Nagaland, my lady." Her eyes widened with shock at Saber's answer, and her jaw dropped in disbelief. Quintus, the elusive general of Kingdom Myril, was now in her own kingdom, Nagaland. Her thoughts raced as she tried to process this information. What could he possibly want in Nagaland? What was he doing? And most importantly, how did he manage to enter her kingdom undetected? Gaia's mind was racing with a million questions and for a moment she forgot to breathe. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the soft hum of magical energy that powered the surveillance room. Saber's solemn expression and the weight of his words only added to the drama of the moment. Finally Gaia found her voice. "Quintus is in Nagaland?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is he doing there?" "Preparing for war, my lady." Gaia felt a chill run down her spine as Saber's words sank in. "Preparing for war? In Nagaland?" She couldn't believe it. "What makes you think that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Saber's eyes narrowed and his face turned grim. "My sources in Nagaland have informed me that Quintus has been gathering a massive army, my lady." It seems like he has made some alliances with some powerful people. He is planning something big and we need to act fast to stop him. Gaia's mind was racing. How did Quintus even manage to enter Nagaland? Who was helping him there? And how was he able to gather such a massive army? And how did he even get there? Who is helping him in Nagaland? She asked, her tone laced with a hint of anger and frustration. Saber sighed deeply, his face etched with worry. I don't have all the details, my lady. But my sources suggest that he has some powerful allies in Nagaland who are helping him. They are probably supplying him with resources and soldiers. Saber stood before Gaia, his expression intense and unwavering. What are your orders, my lady? He asked, waiting for her decision. Gaia paused, her mind racing as she considered their options. She knew that Quintus was a dangerous opponent, and the thought of him in possession of the Dark Lord's armor pieces made her blood boil. After a moment she spoke, her voice low and steady. Find out where he's hiding the armor pieces, she said. And once you're certain of their location, take Quintus down. Saber nodded, his eyes gleaming with fierce determination. As you command, my lady, he said before turning to leave his room. Chapter 905 Blood of the Great Ape King Edros. Noah gazed up at the stormy sky, which rumbled with deafening thunder. The dark clouds loomed overhead as if they were closing in on him, suffocating him with their weight. The eerie mist only added to the place's ominous atmosphere, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The blood array pulsated with a crimson glow as if it was alive and aware of Noah's presence. The treacherous ocean looked just as dangerous and foreboding as the last time he visited. The sky was shrouded in dark clouds that rumbled with thunderous force, and lightning crackled through the air, illuminating the eerie mist in violet flashes. Noah knew that the area was infamous for its powerful and strange mist, which could suppress all senses and even create illusions. He had to be extra careful in this place, where danger lurked at every turn. Despite the danger, Noah steeled himself and took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He knew he had to help Norvin reach his full potential and couldn't let anything stand in his way. As they journeyed through the barren land, Noah couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Andreas materialized out of nowhere as if summoned by Noah's mere presence. He appeared in an ethereal form, his white robes billowing in the wind as he led the way through the barren land. His long white hair flowed freely behind him, creating an almost ghostly effect. Despite his ethereal form, Andreas' eyes shone with deep wisdom and intelligence, radiating a sense of calm and reassurance to Noah. Suddenly Andreas, who had been silent for most of the journey, spoke up. Be on your guard, Noah. We are drawing close to Idros' blood. The power emanating from it is immense, said Andreas, his voice low and serious. Noah nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. He knew that the Ape King's blood was no ordinary substance and that absorbing it came with great risks. While they trudged through the eerie mist, the sound of thunder grew louder and more frequent. The sky rumbled with such intensity that it felt like the world itself was shaking. Andreas looked up at the sky, a frown marring his features. We need to hurry. The storm is growing stronger, and it won't be long before it becomes too dangerous to continue. Noah gritted his teeth and quickened his pace, his eyes fixed on the pulsating crimson glow of the blood array in the distance. He knew that he had to reach it before the storm unleashed its full fury. As Noah and Andreas approached the blood array, the air grew thick with the essence of ancient power. Noah could feel his heart racing with excitement and anticipation as he approached the source of the legendary Ape King's power. Standing before the array, Noah could almost sense the ghostly presence of Edros, the mighty Beast King who had once ruled over the Beast clan with an iron fist. His power and legacy were still alive, and the fact that Norvin was his descendant only served to add to the sense of awe and reverence that Noah felt. Noah was taken aback upon discovering that Norvin was a descendant of Edros, the great Ape King. He had heard many legends about Edros and his mighty rule over the Beast clan, but he never expected to meet his descendant. A sense of awe and wonder washed over him as he realized the importance of his mission to help Norvin unlock his true potential. He couldn't believe he was standing in front of the blood array, a place where Idros' power still lingered and where Norvin would absorb his ancestors' blood to become stronger. Noah's heart raced with anticipation as he wondered what kind of beast Norvin would become. Taking a deep breath, Andreas stepped forward and began to chant the incantation that would activate the blood array. Noah watched in amazement as the runes that were invisible to him suddenly began to glow with a fierce, red light, illuminating the area with an intense energy that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. As the power emanating from the array grew stronger, Noah had to shield his eyes from the blinding light. He could feel the heat emanating from the blood drop, and he knew that Norvin was about to undergo a powerful transformation that would unlock his full potential. Despite the intensity of the moment, Noah felt a sense of calm wash over him as he watched Andreas work his magic. He knew that they were on the brink of something truly amazing, and he could feel his heart racing with excitement at the thought of what was to come. When Noah turned to survey his surroundings, he felt a sudden presence next to him. It was Norvin, but something was wrong. Norvin's eyes were closed and he was unresponsive. Noah's heart sank as he saw Norvin in a state of coma. He felt a wave of sadness and helplessness wash over him as he looked at the golden Babaru lying still. But Noah was not one to give up. He knew that Norvin was a special beast, and he had a way of awakening his true potential. He carefully picked up Norvin and cradled him in his arms, feeling the weight of the unconscious Babaru against him. With determination in his heart, Noah knew that only by absorbing Idris' blood could Norvin become stronger and unlock his full potential. Noah felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders as he began to walk towards the drop of blood. The distance was far, but he could feel the overwhelming power radiating from the drop. The stakes were high and Noah knew he had to be careful. After activating the array, a drop of blood appeared in the barren land far away from Noah. As Noah approached the blood drop, he could see it glimmering in the eerie mist. Despite its distance from him, he could feel its power radiating through the air. It was as if the blood drop was alive, drawing him closer to it with an irresistible force. Noah could see the blood drop reacting to Norvin's presence, slowly moving toward him. Norvin's golden fur shimmered in the violet lightning as if it was attracting the blood drop. It was a strange and mesmerizing sight, and Noah couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder. As he reached the blood drop, he saw it pulsating with an intense red glow. It was a drop of blood that had been left behind by the great ape King Edros himself. Noah knew that this blood drop was the key to unlocking Norvin's true potential. Noah carefully held Norvin in his arms, shielding him from the blinding light of the blood drop. He could feel the blood drop slowly moving closer to them, drawn by Norvin's presence. It was a slow and deliberate process, as if the blood drop was carefully examining Norvin before merging with him. Andreas' voice resonated through the barren land as he said, "Place Norvin here, Noah. Let us see if the blood of Edros is enough to unlock his full potential." Noah gently laid Norvin on the gray, lifeless ground, his golden fur shimmering in the eerie mist. He looked at Norvin with a mix of concern and anticipation, knowing that absorbing his ancestors' blood was the only way to unlock Norvin's true power. As Noah stepped back, the drop of blood slowly made its way toward Norvin. It didn't merge with him immediately, but instead, it seemed to hover around him as if assessing whether Norvin was worthy of its power. Noah watched with bated breath as the blood started seeping into Norvin's body through his fur, his muscles bulging with newfound strength. Norvin's fur transformed into a radiant, shimmering golden coat, and his eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, as if he had become something more than a mere beast. Once the drop of blood was fully absorbed by Norvin, the sky above them shattered with thunder and violet lightning. Noah shielded his eyes from the blinding light, and for a split second, he saw the silhouette of a giant ape behind Norvin. It was as if the spirit of Edros himself had taken notice of Norvin's transformation. The clouds twisted and contorted into the shape of an ape's head before shifting into other forms, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to acknowledge Norvin's newfound power. Noah's jaw dropped in amazement and fear, and he took a few steps back, not daring to take his eyes off the spectacle before him. "Wow," Noah whispered in awe. Norvin absorbed the blood as a strange sensation filled the air. The sound of clashing swords and the roars of dragons echoed all around them. Noah and Andreas looked around but saw nothing but the eerie mist and barren land. The sounds grew louder and more intense, as if they were transported to a battlefield in another realm. Noah could feel his heart pounding in his chest, unsure of what was happening. On the other hand, Andreas remained calm and focused because he had experienced this before. Noah shouted over the deafening noise, "What's happening?" Andreas turned to him with a solemn expression. "This is the power of Idris' blood. It unlocks the memories of his past battles, and we are merely experiencing them." Noah couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had never heard of such a thing before. He watched in awe as the sounds of battle intensified, and the mist began to take on the shapes of soldiers and dragons. It was like they were standing in the middle of an ancient war. Noah's eyes widened in shock as he noticed shadows of dragons looming in the clouds above them, their fierce silhouettes looking all too real. The sounds of war and roars grew louder, echoing through the treacherous ocean. As he scanned the sky, Noah couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching them, something that shouldn't be there. Suddenly, a red-scaled dragon emerged from the clouds, its wings spread wide as it opened its mouth and unleashed a deafening roar that shattered the air around them. Andreas' eyes darted around the sky, trying to locate the dragons. Noah could feel the tension in the air, his heart racing with fear and anticipation. Suddenly, another loud roar echoed through the clouds, and a shadow appeared above them. A dragon with scales as black as night swooped down towards them with blinding speed. Noah raised his hand, a ball of energy forming in his palm. Andreas stood tall beside him, his white hair fluttering in the wind. The dragon landed with a deafening thud, sending shockwaves through the ground. "Ready yourself for battle, Noah. The blood of Edros has opened portals to the treacherous ocean, and it seems to have attracted the dragons to our location," said Andreas, his voice firm and unwavering despite the fear in his eyes. Noah's heart raced as he watched the dragons approach, its eyes fixed on Norvin. He knew they had to act fast to protect their mission and Norvin's safety. The two dragons let out a deafening roar, their fiery breath lighting up the darkened sky. Noah and Andreas stood their ground, their eyes locked on the dragons. As much as Noah liked to form a plan of attack, he simply lacked the luxury of time. At that moment he had to face two half-immortal stage dragons. The red dragon soared through the clouds with its massive wingspan, easily dwarfing any other creature in the sky. Its scales glistened in the light, ranging from deep crimson to bright scarlet as if it was painted with the colors of fire. Its eyes blazed with an intense fury, reflecting the passion and aggression that lay within. The dragon's claws glinted in the sunlight, razor-sharp and deadly, ready to tear apart anything in its path. On the other hand, the black dragon was a stark contrast to the red. Its scales were deep obsidian, shimmering in the sunlight like onyx. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence, revealing a cunning and ruthless nature. Its wings were jagged, giving it an almost demonic appearance as it soared through the clouds. The dragon's fangs were sharp and pointed, glinting menacingly in the sunlight, hinting at the sheer power and ferocity that lay within its jaws. "Are you sure we can take them on, teacher?" Noah asked, his voice laced with doubt. "We have no other choice, my disciple. Norvin's safety and our mission depend on it," replied Andreas, his voice ringing with determination. Chapter 906. The mighty Norvin. Noah faced the two dragons, their scaly bodies towering over him as they let out thunderous roars. The fiery light from their breath illuminated the darkened sky, casting an eerie glow on the barren land around them. Noah's white-hilted swords glimmered in the light, their blades sharp and deadly. The wind howled around them, carrying the scent of burnt earth and the sound of the dragon's roars. Noah's heart raced as he charged toward the dragons, his swords raised high. He could feel the power of the dragons pulsating through the air, their strength palpable. The red dragon breathed a jet of flames at him, but Noah deftly dodged the attack, his swords flashing as he struck the dragon's scaly hide. The black dragon swooped down from the sky, its sharp claws aimed at him, but Noah rolled out of the way just in time. As the two dragons continued to attack, Noah fought with all his might, his swords flashing in the air as he struck them with deadly precision. The blades hummed with power as they clashed against the dragon's scales, sending sparks flying in all directions. The fight was intense, and Noah could feel his strength waning as the dragons continued to attack. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his breaths coming in short gasps. But he refused to give up. With a fierce battle cry, he charged toward the dragons once more, his swords raised high, determined to protect Norvin and complete their mission. As Noah fought the two dragons with all his might, Andreas sensed more and more dragons approaching. The sound of their wings flapping grew louder and louder, drowning out the thunderous roars of the dragons he was fighting. "Noah!" Andreas called out urgently, his voice echoing through the stormy sky. Noah's heart raced as he heard his teacher's voice. He knew that the situation was getting worse by the minute. Suddenly, the two dragons that he was fighting soared toward the sky, their bellies glowing brighter and brighter. Noah knew what was coming next. The dragons were going to use their deadly dragon breath. Despite the stormy weather and heavy rain, the temperature around them rose significantly due to the sheer heat radiating from the dragons' bodies. Noah could feel the intense heat on his skin as he prepared to face the deadly attack. As the dragons unleashed their fiery breath, Noah leaped out of the way just in time. His swords flashed as he dodged the deadly attack, the rain pouring down heavily, the drops stinging his skin. Meanwhile, the sound of wings flapping grew louder, signaling the approach of more dragons. With each passing moment, the situation became more dangerous, and Noah knew he had to act fast to protect Norvin and their mission. Andreas floated towards Noah, his white robes billowing around him. "I can't keep the dragons out, but I can enclose these two within a barrier. You have to defeat them," he said, his voice urgent. Noah's heart raced as he faced the dragons once more. He knew that this was their only chance to protect Norvin and complete their mission. "Don't worry about me. Just form the barrier and keep Norvin safe," he shouted back to Andreas. Andreas nodded, his ethereal form shimmering as he concentrated on the spell. Noah fought with all his might, his swords flashing in the air as he struck the dragons with deadly precision. Noah watched in awe when the golden energy shot out of Andreas and formed the dome around them. He knew Andreas was powerful, but he had never seen him use such incredible energy. The two dragons, now trapped within the barrier, turned their attention towards Noah and Andreas, their eyes burning with fury. They flew straight toward Noah with their claws outstretched, ready to strike. Noah raised his swords, ready to defend himself, but the sheer force of the dragon's attack sent him flying backward. The flames shot out like a torrent, and Noah leaped out of the way, narrowly avoiding the blast. But when the stream of fire hit the ground, it exploded like a bomb, sending shockwaves through the air. Noah felt the impact as he was flung into the barrier, his body crashing into the dome with a sickening thud. Noah struggled to get back up as he clutched his chest, his robes soaked with rain and blood. His hair was matted to his forehead, and his face was twisted in pain and determination. He refused to give up despite the pain and the odds stacked against him. His eyes shone with fierce determination, ready to face the dragons once more. The dragons took advantage of his weakened state and charged toward him with their claws and teeth bared. Noah swung his swords, but the dragons were too quick. One of them clawed at him, leaving deep gashes on his chest. Another tried to bite him, but Noah managed to dodge at the last second, narrowly avoiding certain death. The rain pounded down harder, the thunder and lightning adding to the chaos of the battle. As Noah continued to fight, he could hear the sounds of other dragons trying to break through the barrier that Andreas had formed around them. Noah gritted his teeth as he fought with all his might, his swords flashing as he struck the dragons with deadly precision. But the dragons were relentless, their attacks coming at him from all sides. One dragon breathed a stream of fire at him, but Noah managed to roll out of the way just in time. Another swooped down from the sky, its claws aimed at his head, but Noah managed to block the attack with his swords. Despite his best efforts, Noah was at a disadvantage. His wounds were taking a toll on him and he could feel his strength waning. But he refused to give up, knowing that he had to protect Norvin and their mission at all costs. As the dragons continued to attack, Noah fought back with all his might, his swords glowing with an otherworldly light. The sound of metal clashing against scales echoed through the air as the battle raged on. Despite being at the same cultivation stage as the dragons, Noah knew that their superior size, dragon breath and impenetrable scales gave them the upper hand in the fight. As he dodged their relentless attacks, Noah realized that he needed to use his most powerful weapon, the heavenly flames. Noah took a deep breath, centering himself as he focused his energy on summoning the heavenly flames. He felt the intense heat building within him, coursing through his veins and igniting his palms with a bright blue light. As the rain continued to pour down, the flames danced and flickered, casting shadows across the battlefield. The temperature around them began to rise, causing the raindrops to evaporate into steam. Noah's body trembled as he struggled to control the powerful flames, but he knew he couldn't afford to back down now. Meanwhile, the dragons outside the barrier continued their relentless assault, their massive bodies slamming into the dome as they unleashed their fiery breath. But despite their strength, Andreas' barrier held strong, keeping them at bay for the moment. The two dragons, startled by the sudden appearance of the heavenly flames in Noah's hands, quickly took to the air and distanced themselves from him. They shared a glance, seemingly reconsidering their strategy in the face of such power. Noah, meanwhile, concentrated on channeling the blue flames along his sword blades, the intense heat causing the rain around him to evaporate. As the flames coiled around his swords, he knew that this was his only chance to turn the tide of the battle. With his flaming swords in hand, Noah charged toward the dragons, his heart pounding with adrenaline. The dragons roared and breathed fire, but Noah deftly dodged their attacks, his sword striking with deadly precision. Each swing of his sword sent out a burst of heavenly flames, scorching the dragons' scales and weakening their defenses. Outside the barrier, the other dragons continued to claw and breathe fire, desperate to break through Andreas' dome. But the barrier was strong, and they could only watch as their comrades battled against Noah's fierce onslaught. The battle was intense, with each side unleashing their most powerful attacks. But Noah refused to back down, his determination fueling his every move. With a fierce battle cry, he charged toward the dragons once more, his flaming swords raised high. The dragons towered over Noah, their massive bodies a stark contrast to his smaller frame. But despite their size, Noah moved with a speed and agility that the dragons couldn't match. He closed in on them, his flaming sword in hand, determined to prevent them from using their deadly dragon breath. With a fierce battle cry, Noah swung his sword at the dragons, the heavenly flames engulfing the blade as it sliced through their claws. The dragons roared in anger and frustration, their massive bodies thrashing about as they tried to crush Noah underfoot. Each time they stomped, the ground trembled and cracked, but Noah continued to dodge and weave around their attacks. The dragons were relentless, their attacks coming fast and furious, but Noah remained determined. He continued to strike at them with his flaming sword, each blow weakening them just a little more. The dragons roared in agony as they felt the power of the heavenly flames burning through their scales. The dragons' rage clouded their judgment as they continued to stomp and claw at Noah, ignoring the damage they inflicted on each other. But Noah was quick, his movements almost too fast for the eye to follow. He evaded their attacks with ease, his sword still burning with the heavenly flames. Suddenly, Noah raised his sword to the sky and began to chant a spell. The heavenly flames intensified, their blue glow illuminating the darkened sky. The dragon's head snapped toward Noah, but it was too late. A beam of light shot out from Noah's sword, striking the red dragon in the head before ricocheting toward the black dragon. The dragons roared in agony as the beam hit them, their scales cracking under the intense heat of the heavenly flames. Noah continued to channel the spell, the beam of light growing brighter and brighter until it engulfed the two dragons completely. Despite Noah's powerful attack, he knew that his victory was only temporary as he watched the dragons writhe in pain. Suddenly, the bright light surrounding them shattered like it was made of glass, and the two dragons stepped out of the light, bleeding from multiple wounds. Their eyes glowed with anger, and they let out a deafening roar that sent powerful sonic waves shooting out from their mouths. Noah was disoriented by the force of the roar, and before he could react, the red dragon opened its mouth and unleashed a straight beam of powerful flames. A white shield appeared before Noah to block the flame, but the shield was not strong enough to withstand the dragon's attack. It shattered into pieces, and the aftershock sent Noah flying backward, his body slamming hard into the ground. As the dragons emerged from the shattered light, Noah could see the true extent of the damage he had inflicted upon them. Their once impenetrable scales were now cracked and chipped, oozing blood from deep wounds. The dragons roared in anger, their eyes fixated on Noah as they prepared to launch another attack. But before Noah could even take a step forward, the black dragon dashed towards him with incredible speed, its massive frame blocking out the sky above. The dragon stood over Noah, pinning his hands to the ground with its weight and preventing him from reaching his swords. Noah and the dragon locked eyes, a silent battle of wills playing out between them. Noah knew he had to unleash his full power if he wanted to defeat the dragon. He had held back until now, conserving his energy for the final blow. But the situation demanded he go all out. The dragon raised its head, and its belly began to glow with an ominous light. Noah's eyes widened as he watched the glow grow brighter, realizing the dragon was about to unleash its deadly breath attack. Just as the dragon was about to release its fiery assault, a sudden roar echoed through the air. The dragon quickly shut its mouth and looked up, distracted by the source of the noise. In a blink of an eye, a massive boulder flew out of nowhere and slammed into the dragon's head with incredible force. The dragon was sent flying through the air, crashing into the ground with a deafening thud. Noah's eyes widened in shock as he raised his head, taking in the sight before him. His gaze was met by the towering figure of Norvin, the mighty giant ape, whose immense frame loomed over him, reaching almost 70 feet tall. The fur on Norvin's body was a striking blend of brown and golden hues, reflecting the sunlight in a dazzling display of shimmering colors. It was a fur that was both soft to the touch and strong enough to withstand the toughest of challenges. Norvin's massive arms were longer than most trees, and each muscle rippled with incredible power and grace. With each step he took, the ground shook beneath his feet, and Noah could feel the sheer force of Norvin's presence radiating like a wave around him. It was as if Norvin was an unstoppable force of nature, an embodiment of raw strength and authority. As Noah's gaze locked with Norvin's, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder. Norvin's piercing gaze was intelligent and wise, showing a level of understanding that went beyond the mere instinct of a wild animal. Every movement he made was calculated and deliberate, as if he was always thinking ahead and strategizing his next move. With a mighty roar, Norvin sprang into action. In a blur of movement, he closed the distance between himself and the red dragon, his powerful muscles propelling him forward with astonishing speed. Before the dragon could react, Norvin had already grabbed hold of its wings, his massive hands closing around the dragon's scaly skin with a vice-like grip. With a guttural growl, Norvin lifted the dragon off the ground and hurled it through the air, the beast's body hurtling towards the earth like a falling star. The red dragon crashed into the ground with a deafening thud, sending a shockwave rippling through the earth. For a moment the dragon lay there, stunned and motionless. But Norvin was not finished yet. With a savage roar, he charged towards the fallen beast, his powerful arms swinging like a pair of wrecking balls. As he reached the dragon, Norvin grabbed hold of its wings once more, and with a tremendous burst of strength, lifted the beast up high into the air. With a grunt of effort, Norvin slammed the dragon down onto the ground again and again, each impact sending tremors through the earth. Finally, Norvin released the dragon, letting it fall to the ground with a final crash. The red dragon lay there, battered and broken, unable to stand or fight. Norvin stood over the fallen beast, his chest heaving with exertion, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight. Then Norvin let out a deafening roar that echoed throughout the jungle. He beat his chest with both fists, each thump resonating through the air like a thunderclap. As he stood towering over the fallen dragon, his chest heaving with exertion, he radiated an aura of unbridled power and dominance. It was a primal display, a show of strength and ferocity that left no doubt in anyone's mind who was in charge. Chapter 907 Norvin vs. Nightmare Eye. After almost beating the red dragon to death, Norvin turned his massive gaze toward Noah. The ape's towering form, almost 70 feet tall, made Noah seem insignificant on the ground. Yet, Norvin threw a reassuring smile at Noah before turning his attention back to the black dragon. But the black dragon was not intimidated by Norvin's size or strength. It roared in a fury, unleashing a powerful strike that clawed deep into Norvin's chest. Blood spurted out from the wound, but Norvin stood his ground, unfazed by the attack. The ape and dragon faced each other, their eyes locked in a deadly stare down. They roared at each other with deafening force, their echoes resonating across the treacherous ocean. It was a fierce battle of strength and will, and neither of them could overpower the other. As the battle raged on, Norvin began to beat his chest with increasing force, asserting his dominance over the black dragon. His roars grew louder and more powerful as if to challenge the dragon to try and take him down. The dragon lunged forward with a mighty roar, but Norvin stood firm, his massive arms raised in a show of strength and defiance. The battle between the ape and the dragon was at a stalemate, each one determined to emerge victorious. Their roars continued to shake the earth as they clashed with relentless fury, a testament to the unbreakable will of two powerful creatures. The sky rumbled with deafening thunder as a bolt of lightning came crashing down toward Norvin. Noah watched in horror, thinking that the lightning would strike the giant ape, but instead the lightning bolt surrounded Norvin, enveloping him in a blinding light. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was almost impossible to look at. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light vanished, leaving Norvin standing there, more magnificent than ever before. His muscles bulged with even greater power, and his fur glimmered like gold in the sunlight. Norvin had been transformed by the lightning bolt, and his strength was beyond anything Noah had ever seen. But the lightning strikes didn't stop there. One after another, bolts of lightning hit Norvin, each one boosting his power even further. The air crackled with electricity as the lightning strikes continued, each one turning Norvin into an unstoppable force. As Noah stood back in awe, he watched as Norvin slowly ascended to the half-immortal stage, his power reaching unprecedented levels. It was a sight that left Noah speechless, and he knew that he was witnessing something truly remarkable. It was evident that Norvin's heavenly tribulation was on a whole other level compared to Noah's. With each lightning bolt that struck him, Norvin's power surged, and he glowed with otherworldly energy. He looked like a true half-immortal, radiating strength and power that shook the ground beneath him. With his newfound strength, Norvin lunged at the black dragon with lightning-fast speed, his massive frame dwarfing the beast. He grabbed the dragon's snout with one hand and bit down hard on its neck with his ferocious teeth. The dragon let out a deafening roar of agony as Norvin's teeth were stained red with its blood. With each passing moment, Norvin's grip tightened, and the dragon's struggles grew weaker. Noah watched in awe from a safe distance, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. He had never seen anything like this before, and he knew that Norvin was far beyond anything he had ever faced. The ground trembled underfoot as Norvin and the black dragon continued their fierce battle, their roars echoing throughout the island. Noah stood frozen in awe as he watched the colossal beasts clash in an epic battle of strength and power. He had never witnessed such an intense fight before, and every passing moment seemed to escalate the tension to new heights. As Norvin sank his teeth into the dragon's neck, the air filled with the deafening roar of the wounded beast. But even as the dragon thrashed and writhed in pain, Norvin showed no sign of relenting. Instead, he seemed to grow even stronger, his muscles bulging with newfound power. But the dragon was not ready to admit defeat just yet. With a sudden burst of energy, it began to glow from within, its belly lighting up like a fiery beacon. Norvin's hands burned as he held the dragon's mouth shut, his grip tight and unyielding. As the dragon prepared to unleash its deadly dragon breath, Norvin acted fast, grabbing the dragon's jaw with all his might and forcing its mouth shut. The two colossal creatures locked eyes in a fierce battle of wills, their muscles straining as they fought for dominance. Norvin roared in frustration as he struggled to keep the dragon's mouth shut. His muscles bulged with the effort, and sweat glistened on his fur as he tried to overpower the beast. But suddenly, the black dragon used its massive wings and slammed them into Norvin with incredible force. Norvin was momentarily stunned, caught off guard by the sheer power of the attack. Taking advantage of Norvin's momentary daze, the dragon opened its mouth and unleashed a stream of scorching dragon flame. Norvin roared in agony as the flames licked at his fur and burned his skin. But even in the midst of his pain, Norvin's roar contained more anger than anything else. Gritting his teeth, Norvin leaped into the air and put his fists together, aiming straight for the dragon's head. With a thunderous impact, Norvin's fists connected with the dragon's skull, causing the ground beneath them to tremble and crack. The force of the blow was so immense that several of the dragon's scales cracked and flew off its body, revealing the soft flesh underneath. The dragon roared in pain and fury, thrashing wildly in an attempt to shake Norvin off. But Norvin held on tight, his grip unyielding as he continued to pummel the dragon with powerful blows. As Norvin wrapped his massive hands around the dragon's neck, the black beast thrashed and writhed, desperately trying to break free from Norvin's grip. Suddenly, Noah's body trembled with exhaustion as the barrier kept depleting Andreas' soul energy. As a result, sweat dripped down Noah's face and his vision began to blur. He knew he couldn't hold the barrier for much longer. "I can't hold this much longer," Noah panted, turning to Andreas, whose ethereal figure was flickering and fading. "We need to get out of this treacherous ocean," Andreas said weakly. "More dragons will come." Noah nodded, gritting his teeth as he pushed himself to his feet. He knew he had to get Norvin's attention and bring him back to reality from his battle frenzy mode. With a burst of energy, Noah summoned a bright light that shot up into the sky. It caught Norvin's attention, and the giant ape turned his gaze toward Noah. "Norvin, we need to leave this place. More dragons will come," Noah shouted, hoping to reach the giant ape. With a fierce determination in his eyes, Norvin tightened his grip around the dragon's neck, his massive hands crushing the scaly skin beneath his fingers. The dragon writhed and struggled, its desperate attempts to break free only fueling Norvin's resolve. But as Norvin continued to apply pressure, a sickening sound filled the air, the unmistakable sound of bones breaking. Norvin's eyes went wide with shock as he realized what had happened. He had accidentally snapped the dragon's neck in his quest to subdue it. For a moment, the world seemed to go still as Norvin stared at the lifeless head of the black dragon, its body slowly collapsing to the ground beneath him. The weight of his actions hit Norvin like a ton of bricks, and he felt a sense of deep regret wash over him. Just like Noah, Norvin had always lived by a strict code of honor that forbade him from taking a life. But in the heat of the moment, his newfound strength had betrayed him, and he had broken that sacred rule. As he looked down at the dragon's lifeless body, Norvin couldn't help but wonder, had he gone too far in his quest for power? Norvin's eyes widened with shock and horror as he realized what he had done. The black dragon's lifeless head slowly fell to the ground, the sickening sound of bones breaking still echoing in his ears. He had never intended to kill, and yet his immense strength had unintentionally taken the life of the creature before him. "What have I done?" Norvin muttered, his voice laced with remorse and disbelief. He couldn't believe he had let his newfound strength get the best of him and break his own rule against killing. But before he could fully comprehend the gravity of his actions, another deafening roar shook the ground beneath him. Norvin slowly turned his gaze toward the source of the sound and saw a majestic dragon with scales as red as fire. The treacherous ocean was engulfed in a storm, with raging waves and howling winds adding to the ominous atmosphere as the red dragon flew straight toward them. The red dragon's eyes gleamed with rage as it focused its attention on the barrier that was keeping Noah and Norvin safe. The dragon's massive claws dug into the barrier, sending sparks flying and causing the barrier to flicker and shake under immense force. With a fierce determination, the dragon repeatedly headbutted the barrier, each impact creating deep cracks that grew wider and wider until the barrier finally shattered under the dragon's might. Nightmare, Norvin's eyes widened with shock and recognition as he gazed at the dragon before him. It was none other than Nightmare, the infamous familiar of the Dark Lord himself. Despite being smaller in size than Norvin, the red dragon exuded a terrifying aura of power and strength. Its scales were as red as the fires of hell, shimmering ominously in the stormy climate of the treacherous ocean. Its eyes gleamed with an intense rage that made Norvin crease his brows. Its razor-sharp claws dug deep into the ground, leaving deep trenches in its wake. And its wings were spread wide, making it seem as if it was ready to take flight at any moment. Norvin knew that facing Nightmare would be no easy feat, and he steeled himself for what was to come. Even with his newfound strength, he knew that defeating the Dark Lord's familiar would be an uphill battle. A feeling of deep-seated hostility and rage boiled inside Norvin as he locked eyes with Nightmare. It was as if he had encountered a lifelong foe, and the intensity of his emotions caught him off guard. Prior to absorbing Idros' blood, Norvin had never felt such an overwhelming desire for revenge. But at that moment, all he could think about was crushing the dragon before him. His muscular arms flexed as he balled his fists, his eyes blazing with an intensity that was almost primal. Norvin's fur bristled with anticipation as he let out a deafening roar, challenging Nightmare to come at him with all his might. The stormy ocean seemed to echo with his roar, amplifying the ferocity of the moment. Nightmare's eyes glinted with fury as he surveyed the scene before him. The lifeless body of the black dragon lay crumpled on the ground, and the sight only served to fuel the dragon's already boiling rage. His scales glimmered in the stormy light, and his sharp claws dug deep into the rocky terrain beneath him as he readied himself for battle. When Norvin roared, Nightmare's response was immediate. His own roar echoed through the tumultuous waters, its force shaking the very foundations of the treacherous ocean. As the two mighty creatures faced off against each other, their roars grew louder and more ferocious, each one trying to outdo the other in sheer power and intensity. The wind howled around them as they circled each other, each one waiting for the other to make the first move. Norvin's eyes burned with a newfound determination, and he could feel his muscles tensing with anticipation. Meanwhile, Nightmare's eyes blazed with an all-consuming fury, and his entire body vibrated with the desire to destroy his opponent. With a sudden lunge, the two creatures charged towards each other, their teeth bared and their claws extended. The clash of their bodies reverberated through the air, and the sound of their roars filled the entire ocean. The battle had begun, and it was clear that only one would emerge victorious. Chapter 908 Norvin vs. Nightmare. As Norvin and Nightmare lunged at each other, Noah's heart was pounding in his chest. He watched in awe as the two colossal creatures clashed with an incredible force that sent shockwaves through the treacherous ocean. With blinding speed, Nightmare darted towards Norvin and raised his front legs, delivering a crushing kick to Norvin's chest. Norvin was caught off guard and was sent flying through the air, his massive frame tumbling and crashing through the waves. While Norvin struggled to regain his footing, the other dragons swarmed towards him, ready to attack. But Nightmare bellowed a deafening roar that echoed through the ocean, and the other dragons hesitated, momentarily stunned by the ferocity of his voice. Pialfa and Alpha, no one. Oh, in that moment, Noah felt his legs give out beneath him, and he dropped to his knees, gasping for air. His vision blurred and his head throbbed with pain as he struggled to stay conscious in the midst of the chaos around him. "This is my fight," he declared, his voice booming with authority. The other dragons knew better than to disobey, and they cowered before his presence, unable to challenge the might of the dragon with the blood of the royals. Nightmare's dragon voice reverberated through the treacherous ocean, its deep and powerful timbre commanding respect and fear. It was a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth, shaking the very foundations of the sea. The sound of it sent chills down the spines of even the bravest creatures. As he spoke, his voice carried an air of authority and dominance, a reminder of his royal bloodline and the power he held over the other dragons. They trembled in fear and didn't dare to interrupt the battle that was about to unfold. Norvin steadied himself, gritting his teeth as he felt the blood oozing from his chest. His chest heaved with each ragged breath, but his eyes blazed with a fierce determination. He let out a primal roar, the sound echoing through the treacherous ocean and shaking the ground beneath them. With a newfound strength fueled by his rage, Norvin launched himself at Nightmare, his massive fists balled up into tight knots. His movements were swift and calculated, his immense size and strength giving him an edge over his opponent. The clash between the two giants was like thunder, their blows landing with the force of 100 men. The ground beneath them cracked and crumbled, sending debris flying in all directions. Despite the pain and exhaustion, Norvin refused to back down, his determination to defeat Nightmare pushing him forward. When Nightmare appeared in the treacherous ocean, he was confused and disoriented as he was unsure of how he had been transported there. He had been on his way to meet Claire when a mysterious portal had suddenly appeared and engulfed him. And now he was faced with a scene of chaos and destruction. The Red Dragon's heart sank as he witnessed the aftermath of Norvin's brutal battle. He had never expected to find Norvin engaged in such a violent conflict with other dragons. And when he saw the lifeless body of the slain dragon, a surge of anger and disbelief coursed through him. Nightmare had always believed in resolving conflicts through peaceful means most of the time, and he was certain that Norvin could have subdued the other dragons without resorting to such extreme measures. The fact that he had taken a life without a shred of mercy left a bitter taste in Nightmare's mouth. With his blood boiling and his mind clouded by rage, Nightmare entered into a pure frenzy mode. His eyes glowed with a fierce intensity as he locked his gaze on Norvin, feeling an overwhelming urge to avenge the fallen dragon. The battle between Norvin and Nightmare raged on, each landing powerful blows and dodging the other's attacks. Norvin swung his massive fists at Nightmare, but the dragon was too quick, dodging and retaliating with a fierce blast of fire that singed Norvin's fur. Undeterred, Norvin charged forward and grabbed Nightmare's tail, swinging him around and slamming him into the ground. But Nightmare quickly regained his footing and blasted Norvin with a burst of dark energy, sending him reeling. The two giants continued to trade blows, each struggling to gain the upper hand. Norvin swung his fists and slammed into Nightmare's scales, causing them to crack, but the dragon retaliated with a blast of lightning that arced through the air and struck Norvin in the chest. Despite the intense pain, Norvin refused to back down, and he countered with a powerful blow that sent Nightmare soaring through the air. The dragon crashed to the ground, but he quickly rose to his feet, his eyes gleaming with fury. With a roar, Nightmare charged at Norvin, who met him head-on. The two giants clashed in a fierce battle, each unleashing a flurry of attacks that shook the very earth beneath them. The battle seemed to have no end in sight, each creature determined to emerge victorious. Norvin, being at the half-immortal stage, had an advantage over Nightmare, who was only at the fusion stage. The power surging through Norvin's veins, amplified by the blood of Edros, gave him an incredible strength that he had never felt before. But even with this advantage, Nightmare was not an easy opponent to defeat. As the two beasts clashed, each landing blow for blow, Norvin felt a rush of adrenaline surging through him. With one swift motion, Norvin swung his massive arm and landed a powerful punch on Nightmare's side, causing the dragon to roar in pain. But before Norvin could celebrate his victory, Nightmare retaliated with a fierce bite, sinking his sharp teeth into Norvin's arm. Norvin and Nightmare continued to clash in a fierce battle, each one determined to emerge victorious. The stormy weather around them intensified, with thunderbolts crackling through the darkened sky and the howling winds adding to the chaos of the battlefield. Suddenly, Nightmare prepared to unleash a devastating combination attack. His scales shimmered in the stormy light as he opened his jaws wide and let out a blast of icy breath, sending shards of ice flying towards Norvin. Despite Norvin's best efforts to dodge the attack, some of the shards grazed his fur, leaving small cuts on his body. Infuriated by the attack, Norvin roared and charged towards Nightmare, his massive fists raised high. Nightmare met his attack head-on, clashing his own fists against Norvin's. The ground shook violently as their blows connected, sending shockwaves throughout the barren landscape. As the battle continued, the environment around them began to change. The icy breath unleashed by Nightmare had caused the ground around them to freeze over, making it more difficult for Norvin to maintain his footing. Meanwhile, the fiery breath he had mixed with it caused pockets of flames to erupt, creating obstacles and hazards in the already treacherous terrain. As the clash between Nightmare and Norvin intensified, The surrounding dragons could feel the energy emanating from the two powerful beings. One by one they began to retreat from the area, not daring to interfere with the fierce battle. Meanwhile, in the distance, two figures hovered in the air, their eyes fixed on the ongoing fight. The woman was strikingly beautiful, with fiery red hair that seemed to glow in the stormy sky. Her gaze was unwavering, focused entirely on the battle unfolding before her. Beside her, a ghostly figure floated, bearing a striking resemblance to the fallen warrior Andreas. Though his form was insubstantial, the determination in his eyes was clear. It was none other than Salisi, ruler of Nagaland, and the other soul piece of Andreas. Together they had orchestrated the arrival of the Dark Lord's dragon and the ensuing battle, hoping to settle the score once and for all. As they watched the two familiars clash, Sales's heart raced with anticipation. She had long awaited the chance to strike at the Dark Lord and put an end to his reign of terror. Since both the Dark Lord, the god of darkness, and Noah, the god of light, avoided direct confrontation with each other, Salisi knew she and the other piece of Andreas had to instigate their battle somehow. They plotted to pit Nightmare, the Dark Lord's familiar, against Norvin, Noah's familiar. No matter which familiar died in the hands of the other, it would instigate the battle between their respective gods. At the very least, one would weaken the other's army. "I'd say take out the Dark Lord's familiar," said the other piece of Andreas. Salisi paused for a long moment, contemplating Andreas' words. She knew it was a risky move, but it might be their only chance to rile up the Dark Lord enough to make him make a move against the god of light. They hoped Noah would defeat the Dark Lord and prevent him from plunging the world into darkness. Salisi knew that Noah, the god of light, wouldn't be able to permanently kill the Dark Lord without the god-killing arrows. However, if Noah managed to defeat the Dark Lord, it could buy them some valuable time to grow even stronger. The war between light and darkness had been raging on for centuries, and Salisi knew that every little victory counted. As she watched the battle between Nightmare and Norvin from afar, her mind raced with the possibilities of what could happen if the Dark Lord fell. Would the other gods finally come to this world, or would they continue to watch from the sidelines? She knew that the fate of their world rested on the outcome of this battle. Meanwhile, the battle between Nightmare and Norvin continued to rage on. Nightmare's flight ability gave him the upper hand, allowing him to bombard Norvin with a relentless assault of fire and cold breath. Norvin struggled to keep up with Nightmare's speed and ferocity, but he refused to back down. "He is down," Andreas said, looking at Noah, who collapsed. Whenever Noah's Andreas depleted his soul energy, Noah would enter an unconscious state for some time before recovering. The other Andreas stared down at Noah's unconscious form, his soul energy depleted from the fierce battle. As Noah lay there, helpless and vulnerable, Andreas knew that this was their chance to strike. With a sly grin, he turned to Salisi and whispered, "He's down. Now's our chance to make our move." Salisi nodded in agreement, knowing that they couldn't afford to waste a single moment. They had to act fast if they wanted to defeat the Dark Lord and his armies. Norvin was on his last breaths, his wounds and scorched skin causing him to falter. Nightmare, on the other hand, had the upper hand in the battle and he knew it. He flew straight at Norvin and pinned his arms to the ground, preparing to deliver the final blow. Despite being at a lower cultivation stage, Nightmare's battle training with Gaia had paid off, and he was a formidable opponent. Norvin braced himself for the worst. But just as Nightmare was about to rip Norvin's head off, a sudden bright flash of light lit up the area, blinding the two familiars for a moment. Norvin and Nightmare both closed their eyes, caught off guard by the sudden burst of light. As Norvin struggled under Nightmare's clutches, he suddenly heard a sharp metallic noise that pierced through the chaos of the battlefield. It was followed by a growl that turned into a deafening roar. Then a hot liquid oozed onto his face, and he felt Nightmare's grip loosen. He quickly closed his eyes, anticipating the worst. When he finally opened them again, he saw Noah standing on his chest, wielding his sword. The sword was plunged straight into Nightmare's heart, and the dark energy that emanated from the dragon slowly dissipated. Noah's eyes were glowing brightly, and his aura seemed to have multiplied in intensity. The scene was shocking to say the least. Norvin had never seen Noah like this before. It was as if he had tapped into an entirely different power, one that he had never shown before. The sheer force of the energy emanating from Noah was overwhelming, and it seemed to be consuming him from the inside out. Norvin stared at Noah in shock, wondering what had happened. Had Noah unlocked a new level of power, or was it something else entirely? He couldn't tell, but he knew that something significant had just occurred. "What have you done?" Norvin growled. As the blinding light from Noah's sword pierced through Nightmare's body, Norvin's heart sank. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, Noah, the god of light, breaking his own rule by taking a life. Norvin growled in anger, his eyes fixed on Noah's glowing ones. For a moment, he thought he saw a hint of madness in Noah's eyes, like he was a different person entirely. The sharp metallic sound echoed through the air as Noah withdrew the sword from Nightmare's body. Norvin watched in horror as the dragon slowly fell to the ground, writhing in pain. He was about to rush to the dragon's aid with healing potions when Nightmare vanished into thin air. Norvin blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had Noah somehow sent the dragon to another realm? Noah stood there, his eyes still glowing, his aura still burning with intensity. It was a moment that Norvin would never forget. Norvin didn't feel relieved. Instead, fear took over him as he realized the grave consequences of Noah's actions. If the Dark Lord learned that his beloved familiar, Nightmare, was killed by Noah's hand, he would stop at nothing to seek revenge. Norvin knew that the Dark Lord would not rest until he avenged his familiar's death. Noah's eyes blazed with an otherworldly light, making Norvin wonder if this was truly Noah before him or someone else in Noah's form. Norvin's heart was pounding in his chest as he realized the full extent of what had just happened. The consequences of Noah's actions could mean the end of everything they knew. Norvin concentrated and willed himself to shrink in size until he was about 6 feet tall, the same height as Noah. He knew that in order to snap Noah out of his strange state, he needed to meet him at eye level. As he approached Noah, he could see that the glow in his eyes was still present, and his aura was still burning with intense energy. Then he watched in horror as Noah's eyes, once ablaze with power, suddenly faded and went dark. Noah's body swayed and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Norvin quickly rushed to his side and knelt down beside him, checking for a pulse. Relief washed over him as he felt a faint but steady heartbeat. But the relief was short-lived. Norvin knew that this was not a good sign. Whatever had caused Noah's eyes to glow and his aura to burn so intensely had clearly taken a toll on him. He feared for his friend's safety and wondered what kind of danger lay ahead. As Norvin sat there, cradling Noah's head in his lap, he could feel his heart racing with anxiety. He knew that he had to act quickly and find a way to help Noah before it was too late. Chapter 909 Death of Nightmare. The dark forest was enveloped in an eerie silence as the pocket dimension attached to the dark abyss came to life. The air crackled with foreboding energy as a large figure materialized out of thin air. It was Nightmare, the Dark Lord's fierce familiar, who had been teleported to the pocket dimension by Michael's system after Noah's fatal blow. As Nightmare landed on the dark soil, his breathing was heavy, and his scales were slick with sweat and blood. He tried to stand up, but his legs gave way and he fell to the ground with a thud. The once mighty dragon was now reduced to the size of a small dog, whimpering in pain. His once mighty form was now reduced to that of a small dog, lying helplessly on the ground. Gaia and Azazel appeared in a flash of light, and their footsteps echoed through the empty space. Gaia's heart pounded as she rushed towards Nightmare, her eyes welling up with tears at the sight of his wounded body. She could see the hole in his chest and the blood slowly dripping from it. Gaia's hands shook as she pulled out a healing potion, hoping to save her dear friend. As she poured the potion into the wound, a strange light surrounded it, preventing the healing potion from having any effect. Gaia's eyes widened with shock and horror as she realized the gravity of the situation. Nightmare's life was in grave danger. Listen. Nightmare's voice trailed off, but Gaia couldn't bear to hear him speak. She poured another healing potion into his mouth, hoping it would help, but it was in vain. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the situation was beyond her control. Azazel stood on the side, his eyes glued to the dying Nightmare. His heart sank as he watched the life force slowly drain out of the dragon's body. He knew that the healing potions would have no effect, but he couldn't bear to see Nightmare suffer like this. Gaia, on the other hand, refused to give up. She poured healing potions into Nightmare's wound repeatedly, but the strange light surrounding the wound seemed to be preventing the potions from working. As she poured another potion into Nightmare's mouth, he let out a loud growl, sending a puff of hot air toward her face. "Stop," he said in a weak voice, his eyes dimming. "It's no use. I'm dying." Gaia's eyes widened with shock and disbelief. She couldn't accept that Nightmare was going to die. "No, you can't die," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We have to find a way to save you." But Nightmare shook his head weakly. "There is no way," he said. "I have been fatally wounded. My time has come." Azazel's heart sank as he heard those words. He knew that the Dark Lord would be devastated if he learned of Nightmare's death, He immediately tried to contact him, but there was no response. Gaia's heart was in agony as she watched Nightmare's life force slowly fade away. Memories of their time together flashed through her mind, from the playful fights to the countless times she had chased him around for teasing her. She remembered how he had grown from a tiny dragon to a mighty creature and how he had always been there for her, like a little brother. Despite the age-old hostility between her race and dragons, Gaia couldn't bear the thought of losing Nightmare. As she poured the healing potion into Nightmare's mouth, she watched in despair as the strange light surrounding his wound prevented it from healing. His breathing became heavier and labored, and he emitted a puff of hot air, almost as if he was trying to stop her from prolonging his suffering. Gaia felt helpless and powerless, and her anger towards whoever had stabbed Nightmare was overshadowed by her worry for his life. She couldn't imagine a world without Nightmare, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. Azazel's attempts to contact the Dark Lord proved futile, and the situation grew increasingly dire as Nightmare's life force continued to fade away. It was as though an invisible force was preventing him from contacting the Dark Lord. Despite Gaia's attempts to heal him, Nightmare knew that his end was near. Gaia's tears fell on Nightmare's face as she held him in her arms, her voice breaking as she promised to heal him. But Nightmare knew the truth and he shook his head, his breathing growing shallower. "Don't talk. Save your energy. I will heal you." Gaia's voice stuttered as she frantically searched for a way to save Nightmare. But Nightmare slowly shook his head. "You cannot. I can feel it, I am going to die." Nightmare's voice was weak and strained, his breaths coming in short gasps. "No, you're not. You're going to be okay," Gaia pleaded, her tears falling onto Nightmare's face as she held him close. "Please just let me go in peace. I don't want my death to trigger a war. Promise me and let me." Nightmare coughed up more blood, his body growing weaker with each passing moment. Gaia held onto Nightmare tightly, trying to stop the inevitable. She could feel his strength slowly leaving his body and his breathing becoming shallower with each passing moment. Nightmare lifted his head and looked into Gaia's eyes, his own eyes filled with gratitude and sadness. "Thank you for everything, sister," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I wish I had more time." Gaia's heart broke as she watched life slowly slip away from her dear friend. She could feel her tears falling on Nightmare's scales as he weakly put his head on her shoulder to embrace her. "Please, let me go, in peace," he murmured, his breaths becoming more labored. "This is my dying wish." Gaia nodded, unable to speak as she held onto Nightmare. She knew that she had to let him go, but the pain of losing him was too much to bear. She whispered her own words of gratitude and love to him as he took his final breath, and she felt his body go limp in her arms. Gaia stood there in disbelief, holding Nightmare's lifeless body in her arms. She couldn't comprehend that her beloved dragon, her little brother, was gone forever. All the memories of their adventures together flashed before her eyes, making her feel like she had lost a part of herself. Her heart was heavy with grief, and she couldn't bear the pain of losing someone she loved so dearly. The world around her seemed to have stopped moving and everything was eerily quiet. Even Azazel, who was usually composed and unaffected by emotions, shed a tear for Nightmare. He knew how much the dragon meant to Gaia and how devastated she must be feeling right now. Gaia finally broke her silence, her voice sounding hollow and devoid of any emotions. "Where is he?" she asked, referring to the Dark Lord. "I cannot reach him, my lady," Azazel spoke cautiously, not wanting to add to her pain. Without another word, Gaia stood up, still holding Nightmare's body in her arms, and disappeared from the pocket dimension. Azazel was left behind, feeling helpless and powerless to comfort her. As Azazel stood in the pocket dimension, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone else there with him. A shiver ran down his spine as he scanned the area, but there was no one in sight. Suddenly he heard a voice, one that he recognized all too well. "It had to happen," the Dark Lord's voice echoed through the space, but there was no physical form to accompany it. Azazel's heart skipped a beat and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. For a moment he thought he just imagined things, the sadness of Nightmare's death playing tricks on his mind. But deep down he knew that something was amiss. 2 days had passed since Nightmare's demise, and the atmosphere in the castle was heavy with grief and sorrow. The Dark Queen had locked herself in her chambers, and no one had seen or heard from her since the day of Nightmare's death. Azazel, the demon butler, had taken charge of cleaning up the chaos Vidora had left behind in their path of destruction. The three-headed Hydra had gone on a rampage upon hearing the news of Nightmare's death, causing mass destruction and chaos throughout the castle. Azazel had never seen Vidora agree on something so quickly before, and their combined anger was a force to be reckoned with. In an attempt to subdue the raging Hydra, Azazel and his vampire death squad put their lives on the line. The battle was fierce, and Azazel had to use every ounce of his strength to stop Vidora from destroying the castle. The three heads worked in unison, breathing fire, ice and poison at the attackers. Azazel's body was covered in burns and cuts, but he refused to give up. His determination to bring Vidora under control kept him going. Finally, Azazel managed to inject Vidora with a paralyzing poison, causing them to collapse to the ground. The demon butler breathed a sigh of relief as he caged Vidora in the same cage Alicia had attempted to use to capture the Dark Lord. Despite his victory, Azazel knew that the battle was far from over. The loss of Nightmare triggered a chain reaction of events that would have a profound impact on the future of their world. Roelfadialfa Naam sudden. Why the castle shook violently as though a devastating earthquake had struck. Azazel sprinted out of the surveillance room and onto the castle's balcony, only to witness a terrifying sight. The dark clouds in the sky were as black as midnight, and an overwhelming surge of energy fluctuations was causing the sky to crackle with lightning. The ocean below the floating mountain had become so turbulent that towering waves crashed against the mountain's edges. To make matters worse, several colossal tornadoes were swirling across the sky, ready to tear apart anything in their path. Ignoring the danger, Azazel flew up to the top of the Sword-Hilt Mountain, where the Dark Lord used to meditate. There he saw Gaia encased in a brilliant golden energy dome. The heavenly tribulation had begun, and Gaia was attempting to step into the immortal stage. Azazel could only watch as Gaia triggered her heavenly tribulation. The thunder roared so loudly that it felt like the very mountain would crumble to the ground. The lightning strikes were so intense that they illuminated the entire sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Meanwhile, the tornadoes continued their onslaught, destroying everything in their path. The dwarves who were busy constructing the castle dropped their hammers and other tools and ran as fast as they could inside the castle. They shouted and panicked, pushing and shoving each other to get inside the castle, seeking shelter from the raging storm. Some of them stumbled and fell on the ground, but they quickly got up and continued to run towards the castle. At the same time, the vampires who were patrolling the floating mountain saw the black clouds and the violent energy fluctuations in the air. They immediately landed on the ground and ran towards the castle, moving as fast as they could. Their eyes widened with fear as they saw the towering waves and the tornadoes approaching the mountain. They could hear the deafening sound of the wind and the waves crashing onto the mountain, making it shake violently. The vampires didn't waste any time and flew towards the castle, joining the dwarves who had already sought shelter. They too pushed and shoved their way inside, their hearts racing with fear as they heard the storm's fury outside. Once they were all inside the castle, they waited anxiously for the storm to pass, hoping that they would be safe from harm. As the world trembled under the wrath of the heavenly tribulation, Azazel rushed back to the surveillance room with a determined look on his face. He knew this was a critical moment and had to act fast. Summoning all the powerful subordinates and the vampire death squad, he ordered them to gather at the dark ocean. The ground shook violently, and the castle's walls creaked and groaned under the immense pressure of the raging winds. Azazel could feel the hairs on his arms stand on end as he braced himself against the howling wind. But he couldn't afford to waste any time. The Dark Queen was going through her heavenly tribulations and would be at her weakest. Azazel knew that he had to act quickly and decisively to ensure her safety. He cursed under his breath, knowing they could have been better prepared if only the Dark Queen had informed him earlier. But now there was no time for regrets. They had already lost Nightmare, and he wouldn't let anything happen to the Dark Queen. Chapter 9-10 5 days before Nightmare's death, Michael sat with an air of quiet confidence at a wooden table in the dimly lit tavern. His eyes flickered around the room, scanning the faces of the other patrons with a sense of unease. The atmosphere was thick with tension, punctuated by the occasional clink of glasses and murmurs of hushed conversations. As he waited for Mutrad's arrival, Michael's mind was consumed by the danger that lurked around every corner. He had already shed blood to obtain the information they needed, and he knew that there were those who would stop at nothing to prevent him from completing his mission. But Michael wasn't worried. He remained calm and patient, knowing that panic and fear would only lead to mistakes. Instead, he sat quietly, his senses on high alert, waiting for Mutrad to arrive and deliver the next piece of the puzzle. The door creaked open, and Mutrad stepped into the dimly lit tavern, his eyes scanning the room nervously. His steps were hesitant as he approached Michael, the weight of the information he carried heavy on his shoulders. "It's true. The House of Gladwrath took the artifacts, and they are challenging both House Howrid and House Big Mag for trial by combat, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Michael's eyes narrowed, a steely determination settling in his gaze. He knew that their mission had become even more dangerous and urgent. The fate of the entire Arctic Hall now rested on their success in retrieving the stolen artifact. So House Gladwrath had a hand in Harry's disappearance, Michael said calmly, his voice belying the intense anger burning within him. Mutrad saw the thick killing intent in his eyes and knew that the Dark Lord was not to be trifled with. The tavern was silent, with the occasional clink of glasses and murmurs of conversation. The tension in the air was palpable, and it felt as though the entire world was waiting for Michael's next move. Mutrad looked uneasy and opened and closed his mouth as though he had to say something but couldn't find the courage to speak those words. When I wipe Gladwrath off the map, you can find your scepter without going through this trial by combat, Michael calmly said. Mutrad wasn't shocked by his words as he expected Michael to react this way. Hence, he came prepared to sway the Dark Lord from wreaking havoc. Just hear me out first. I know it's highly likely House Gladwrath took the spirit child and used his blood to steal our artifacts. But if you attack them now, the entire Sea Realm will wage war against you and won't stop until one of you is wiped out. Do you really want another enemy? You already have enough of them to deal with, said Mutrad, trying to change the Dark Lord's mind. To be honest, it was surprising for Mutrad to see the Dark Lord be calm and talk to him instead of destroying House Gladwrath. I assume you have a plan to rescue the spirit child with minimal damage to your world, said Michael, and Mutrad nodded. There is a rule that allows one to fight for more than one house. So if you help us win the trial by combat against House Gladwrath, I will pursue the head of House Big Mag to use their artifact's ability to locate the spirit child, said Mutrad, hoping the Dark Lord would agree to his plan. The air around Mutrad grew heavy with palpable tension as he spoke. He could feel the weight of Michael's gaze on him like a physical force, and he struggled to maintain his composure. Why didn't you say anything about the Big Mag family's artifact before? Michael's voice was cold, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward. Mutrad swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. I didn't know until today, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael's intense gaze lingered on Mutrad, searching for any signs of deceit. When he found none, he leaned back in his chair, but the tension in the room remained thick. Explain your plan, he said, his voice low and measured. Mutrad took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Attacking House Gladwrath directly will only put the spirit child in danger. But if we follow my plan, we can rescue the child without risking their life. Michael considered Mutrad's words carefully. He knew that direct action would be risky, but he didn't want to waste more time. The fate of the spirit child hung in the balance, and every passing moment increased the risk of harm. After a moment of silence, Michael spoke. What's the plan? Michael's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, intrigued by the complexity of the trial by combat. Go on, he urged, his voice low and measured. Mutrad hesitated for a moment before continuing. The challenger is the one who stole the artifact and they can choose up to 20 warriors. The challenged party is the one who lost the artifact and can only choose one warrior. The two parties will fight in a sacred land where the challenger's artifact is kept. To win the trial, the warrior chosen by the challenged party has to take the challenger's artifact through the 20 warriors and the guardian. It is an almost impossible task, but it's the only way to win the trial. Michael's mind raced as he absorbed the information. 20 warriors and a guardian? This trial was far more challenging than he initially thought. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders as he realized that Mutrad's family's fate rested on his success in this trial. So, you need me to be your chosen one, Michael said, his voice heavy with understanding. Mutrad's eyes were filled with desperation as he pleaded with Michael. I understand that it's a lot to ask, but my family's future rests on this trial. We can't afford to lose. Michael's eyes narrowed as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. 20 warriors and a guardian? This trial is more perilous than I could have imagined, he said, his voice low and intense. Mutrad's face was etched with anxiety. That's why I need your help, Dark Lord. I cannot face them alone. Michael leaned forward, his gaze never leaving Mutrad's. And if I accept your request and manage to retrieve the artifact, what happens next? The elders will return the artifacts to their rightful families and act as if nothing has happened, Mutrad replied. Michael's surprise was palpable. That's all? Mutrad nodded, but there was a tense silence before he continued. Losing the artifact is viewed as the ultimate sign of weakness. If the chosen one fails to retrieve the artifact, the family who lost it will be exiled from the Arctic Hall forever. The victor would keep the artifacts and have the power to give the artifacts to whoever they want and form 2 new families under their rule. If the stakes weren't high, I wouldn't have asked for your help, Dark Lord. Mutrad's body language spoke volumes about his desperation. He fidgeted in his seat, his eyes darting around the dimly lit tavern, and nervously bit his lower lip. Sweat glistened on his forehead, despite the chilly atmosphere of the place. He hesitated before speaking, his voice shaking slightly as he explained the gravity of the situation. Mutrad knew that the stakes were high and that his family's future hung in the balance. The weight of responsibility weighed heavily on him, and he knew he couldn't handle it alone. It was clear from his demeanor that he needed the Dark Lord's help and was willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. What if the House of Big Mag doesn't want to use their artifact to find the spirit child? Michael asked, his eyes piercing into Mutrad's. And what if they don't want me to be their chosen one? I am the big bad Dark Lord after all. What makes you think your family and the Big Mag family would be willing to bet their fates on my shoulders? Michael snickered, his tone laced with skepticism. Mutrad's desperation was palpable, his eyes pleading with Michael. We don't have any other options. You're our last hope, the only one who can save our family's future. Michael leaned forward, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. And what made you choose the big bad Dark Lord instead of one of your strongest warriors? Because you're the Dark Lord, Mutrad replied, his voice shaking with fear. You have the power to destroy us all. But you also have the power to save us. Please help us. Michael leaned back on his chair, his expression unreadable. The weight of Mutrad's words hung heavily in the air, and Michael knew that he had a difficult decision to make. The fate of 2 families rested on his shoulders, and the trial by combat was far more dangerous than he had imagined. But Michael was the Dark Lord and he knew that sometimes to gain power one must take risks. Michael leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Mutrad, his eyes blazing with intensity. You're asking me to put my life on the line for your family's fate. Do you understand what that means? It means I'm risking everything, and for what? A promise that you might not even keep? Mutrad shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the dimly lit tavern. I know what I'm asking, Dark Lord. But I'm desperate. I have no other options. Michael's jaw tightened as he weighed his options. He knew there would be no turning back if he agreed to help Mutrad. But the thought of the spirit child in danger stirred something in him, a sense of duty that he couldn't ignore. One way or another, I can find the spirit child, Michael said, his voice low and serious. But I need to know that I can trust you. Swear your loyalty to me and I'll win the trial for you. Mutrad hesitated, his eyes locked with Michael's. I can't swear my loyalty to you just like that, he said finally. But I promise that I will do everything in my power to repay you for your help. Michael's expression hardened. That's not good enough, he said, leaning back in his chair. I need your loyalty, Mutrad. And if you can't give me that, then I can't help you. Mutrad hesitated to swear his loyalty to the Dark Lord because he knew that it was a significant risk. He had always been taught to fear the Dark Lord and had heard the tales of his immense power and cruelty through the prophecies. He had also seen the devastation the Dark Lord had wrought upon those who had crossed him. But Mutrad was desperate and knew he had no other choice. He needed the Dark Lord's help to retrieve the stolen artifact and save his family's future. He also knew that the Dark Lord had a reputation for keeping his word and fulfilling his end of the bargain. Ultimately, it was a difficult decision, but he knew swearing his loyalty was the only way to ensure that the Dark Lord would help him. He also knew that once he swore his loyalty, he would be bound to the Dark Lord and have to follow his orders no matter what. But Mutrad was willing to do whatever it took to save his family, even if it meant sacrificing his own freedom. Chapter 9:11. The last chapter 909 happened 5 days before Nightmare's death. As soon as Mutrad pledged his loyalty to Michael, he followed him to the sacred area where the trial by combat was to take place. They journeyed through treacherous terrain, the path leading them farther and farther away from the Arctic Hall Empire. The murky depths of the ocean surrounded them, and Michael could feel the weight of the water pressing against his skin. The only light came from glowing fish darting in and out of sight. It was an eerie and unsettling journey, but Michael was determined to see it through. When Michael followed Mutrad into the unknown depths of the ocean, the darkness enveloped him like a heavy cloak, making his heart race with anticipation. With each step he took, the pressure increased and the temperature dropped, signaling that they were venturing into an uncharted territory that was forbidden to outsiders. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally arrived at a majestic palace glistening in the darkness like a beacon of hope. Its towering walls and grand arches were unlike anything Michael had ever seen, and he couldn't help but feel awestruck by its sheer grandeur. But there was no time for admiration, for the area was heavily guarded by earthens and wraiths, clad in full armor, ready to strike down any intruders without mercy. Their sharp eyes scanned every inch of the area, making it clear that they would not hesitate to attack if provoked. While Michael followed Mutrad through the murky depths of the ocean, he felt a sense of awe wash over him. The palace that came into view was unlike anything he had ever seen. The structure was made entirely of coral and glimmered with an ethereal beauty under the water's light. It was a grand palace with multiple levels and grand pillars that supported a massive dome-like roof that allowed the light from the dome to filter in, casting a warm glow over the palace. The palace's entrance was guarded by earthens and wraiths, each standing at attention in full armor, their eyes alert and focused. Michael could feel their unwavering loyalty to their cause, and he couldn't help but admire their dedication. As they approached the palace's entrance, a grand door made of mother-of-pearl opened, revealing the grandeur of the interior. The floors were made of marble, and the walls were adorned with intricate carvings that glowed softly in the light. The guards stationed at the entrance of the palace didn't bother asking questions as they recognized Mutrad and knew why they were there. Michael's identity as the Dark Lord remained hidden from them, but they granted them passage with a simple gesture. Their armor gleamed in the soft light, and their weapons were at the ready, a constant reminder of the danger lurking within the palace's walls. Michael followed Mutrad through the grand entrance, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation as he stepped inside. The palace's interior was even more breathtaking than the exterior, with towering marble pillars and intricate carvings adorning the walls. The marble floors gleamed underfoot, reflecting the warm glow of the dome's rays that filtered in. As Michael and Mutrad continued through the palace, they entered a vast hall that stretched out before them. The hall was deserted, and the only sound was the soft gurgle of water flowing through an unseen passage. At the end of the hall, a raised platform held several thrones, their ornate designs hinting at the power of the individuals who would sit upon them. Behind the thrones, a massive glass door opened onto the ocean floor, revealing the murky depths that lay beyond. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as he gazed out into the dark abyss, wondering what lay hidden in its depths. "The elders will be here soon," said Mutrad. Michael nodded and walked around the hall to familiarize himself with the palace. A while later, Michael sensed the space around him distort. When he turned around, he saw a tall man with a sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes. His posture is rigid, and his expression is often inscrutable, betraying little emotion. He wore luxurious robes embroidered with intricate designs and radiated a powerful aura, making it clear that he was the leader of the group behind them. "My lord." When Valen arrived, Mutrad dropped to one knee and greeted him with full respect. But Valen's gaze was fixed on Michael, and there was an unmistakable flicker of fear and uncertainty in his eyes. It was clear to Michael that Valen had only agreed to seek his help because he had no other choice. Michael couldn't help but find the situation somewhat ironic. He found it amusing that when people were in a state of helplessness, they were willing to overlook any prophecies or beliefs and turn to the Dark Lord himself for aid. But now that Valen was standing before him, he seemed no longer sure what to believe. Valen, a man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, seemed to be sizing Michael up as he approached. Michael, who had seen his fair share of rulers and leaders, was not intimidated by Valen's presence. However, he was acutely aware of the fear that Valen was struggling to conceal. The tension in the room was palpable, and Michael could sense the unease that lingered in the air. He knew that Valen's fear was not unfounded, as the situation they faced was a grave one. The Dark Lord's power and influence were vast, and his wrath could be unleashed at any moment. "It's quite ironic, don't you think?" Michael said with a chuckle, his eyes fixed on Valen. "You sent your servant Mutrad to capture me, all because of some prophecy that portrayed me as the evil Dark Lord. And now here you are, overlooking that very same prophecy and asking for my help." Valen shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering with a mix of fear and uncertainty. He knew he had no choice but to seek Michael's help, but the thought of relying on the one prophesied to bring destruction to their world was unnerving. "I had no other choice," Valen replied, his voice laced with apprehension. "The situation is dire, and we need all the help we can get." Michael's gaze hardened, his expression turning serious. "I understand the gravity of the situation. But let me make one thing clear. I'm not doing this for you or for anyone. I am doing this because House Big Mag has something that could help me find someone, said Michael. Valen and his family were uneasy about asking for the Dark Lord's help but were desperate to find their lost artifact. They had exhausted all other options and had nowhere else to turn. The Dark Lord's power was well known, and his reputation as an evil and ruthless being preceded him. But Valen knew he had to put aside his fears and seek the one who could help them. It was in this state of desperation that they turned to the one person they had sworn to never ask for help, the Dark Lord himself. Valen and his family had always viewed the Dark Lord with a mixture of fear and revulsion. His reputation as a ruthless and powerful ruler had made him a figure to be feared and avoided at all costs. But at that moment, it was either asking for the Dark Lord's help or being exiled from the Arctic Hall forever. When Michael was confronting the members of How Rid, the space around him suddenly seemed to warp and distort, and a vortex appeared in the center of the room. Several figures stepped out of the portal, their imposing presence filling the room. At the group's forefront was a man towering over 7 feet, with muscles bulging beneath his loose golden robes. His head was completely bald and his face was devoid of any hair. Each of his companions was similarly bald, tall, and intimidating. As they entered the room, their footsteps echoed loudly on the floor, sending chills down the spines of those present. Michael immediately recognized them as members of House Big Mag, and it was clear why they had earned their name. The leader of House Big Mag, a man known as Gormak, stepped forward with an air of confidence and authority. His eyes roamed over the assembled group, sizing them up with a quick, practiced glance. The air grew thick with tension, and each member felt a chill run down their spine as they gazed upon the Dark Lord. His very presence seemed to fill the room, and his piercing gaze made them feel as though he could see straight through their souls. But after the members of House Big Mag stepped through the portal, the atmosphere grew even tenser. These were not men to be trifled with. Towering over 7 feet tall and covered in golden robes, they exuded a sense of raw power and strength that made the members of House Howrid feel small and insignificant in comparison. The room fell silent as the members of House Big Mag approached, their bald heads shining in the dim light of the tavern. Even Mutrad, who had been so confident before, looked nervous as he faced these intimidating figures. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by Michael's voice. "Did you address my terms to them?" he asked Mutrad, his voice laced with an underlying threat. Mutrad swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He knew that this was a dangerous situation and that the fate of both families rested on Michael's shoulders. "Yes," he replied finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "They agreed to help, but only if we helped them first." Despite their imposing appearance, the group felt a chill running down their spines as they laid eyes on Michael, the Dark Lord, in person. His aura was suffocating, his eyes piercing through them like a sharp blade. The members of House Big Mag looked at him with a mix of fear and uncertainty, realizing the magnitude of the situation they were in. Mutrad nodded, his eyes darting nervously between Michael and the members of House Big Mag. He knew that the situation was delicate, and he had to tread carefully if he wanted to achieve his goal. Michael had agreed to help both families retrieve their stolen artifacts. In return, Mutrad had promised him that the artifact of House Big Mag could locate Harry, the spirit child. It was a pity that House Big Mag had also lost their artifact to House Gladrath, but the silver lining was that if they hadn't lost it, Mutrad would never have learned about its unique ability. The tension in the room was palpable as Michael and the members of House Big Mag stared each other down. The fate of the two families rested on the success of the trial, and the stakes couldn't be higher. "We expect nothing but success from you, Dark Lord. If you fail to retrieve the artifact, the consequences will be dire for everyone involved." Gormak's voice was deep and gruff, the perfect complement to his towering stature. Michael's gaze narrowed, a steely determination settling in his eyes. He knew that the stakes were high and that the fate of two families rested on his success in the trial by combat. But Michael was the Dark Lord, and he knew that helping them retrieve the artifacts was the safest route to save Harry. "I will retrieve the artifact," he said, his voice low and intense. "And when I do, you will use your artifact to locate the one I am looking for." Gormak's eyes flickered with a hint of concern. "And who is it that you are looking for, Dark Lord?" Michael's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes burned with a fierce intensity. "That is none of your concern," he replied, his voice low and dangerous. Valen stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Michael's. "And once you find the one you're looking for, we ask you to leave our world and never return," he said, his voice firm. Michael's gaze flickered over to Valen, considering his words carefully. He knew that he would have no reason to remain in the Arctic Hall once he found what he was looking for. But he also knew that leaving behind a trail of enemies was never a good idea. Michael's voice was low and controlled, but there was a hint of danger in his tone. If it weren't for someone in your world taking someone I care about, I wouldn't have even set foot in your world, he said, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. The room fell silent as Michael's words hung heavily in the air. The members of House Big Mag and House Howrid exchanged nervous glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Let me make myself clear. If House Gladrath has taken more than just the artifact, and I have every reason to believe they will face the consequences. I suggest you do not get in my way, Michael said firmly, his voice laced with a quiet but deadly intensity. Chapter 9:12, After Nightmare's Death. The people of Michael's world thought hell was just a figure of speech and did not exist in real life. However, only a few higher-ups in the Sky Hall knew that the realm of hell was very true. They knew the realm of hell was a place of darkness, despair, and unending suffering. From the perspective of someone who found themselves in this accursed place, it was an unimaginable nightmare. The landscape was barren and desolate, devoid of any signs of life or beauty. The ground was rough and jagged, littered with sharp rocks and broken bones. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, ash, and decay, making it difficult to breathe. In the distance, the skies were dark and foreboding, with black clouds swirling and lightning flashing in every direction. There was no sun or moon or natural light to guide one's way. Instead, the only light came from the flickering flames that rose up from the molten lava rivers that ran through the realm. As one moved through the realm, they encountered various forms of torment and torture. Servants of hell and other malevolent beings lurking in the shadows, eager to inflict pain and suffering on the hapless souls who had been damned to hell. The screams and cries of the damned could be heard echoing through the darkness, a constant reminder of the misery that awaited those who dared to enter this realm. In hell there was no escape, no respite from the unrelenting agony that one was forced to endure. It was a place of eternal suffering, where the tormented souls were trapped forever, unable to find peace or rest. It was a place that one would do well to avoid, lest they found themselves lost in the darkness, doomed to suffer for all eternity. At the center of hell was the castle of the ruler of hell was built in the center of a lone mountain, surrounded by jagged peaks and a moat of boiling lava. It was a massive, foreboding structure with black stone walls that reached up toward the dark, stormy sky. The gates were made of iron and adorned with twisted demonic faces, and the courtyard was filled with strange, otherworldly creatures. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, and the sound of screams echoed from within the castle's walls. It was a place of eternal darkness and despair, where only the bravest or most foolish would dare to enter. Suddenly, a luminous orb materialized in the sky and drifted toward the castle. As the ball of light floated through the castle's halls, its illumination revealed a macabre and foreboding atmosphere. The walls were lined with skulls and bones of all shapes and sizes, arranged in twisted patterns. The floors were slick with blood and littered with the remains of the tortured souls who had met their gruesome fates within these walls. The air was heavy with the stench of decay and sulfur, and the flickering torches cast eerie shadows on the walls, making it seem like the castle was alive with malevolent spirits. The sound of dripping blood echoed through the hallways, and the occasional moan or scream of agony could be heard in the distance. Clearly, this was no ordinary castle but a place of unspeakable darkness and horror, ruled by an entity of unfathomable power and malice. The atmosphere grew even more sinister as the ball of light approached the throne hall. The walls were adorned with grotesque tapestries depicting scenes of torture and suffering, and the throne finally, it reached the throne hall, casting an eerie light on the ruler of hell as he sat upon his throne, which itself was carved from blackened bones and adorned with the skulls of defeated enemies. "Where am I?" A gentle voice sounded from the ball of light. As the gentle voice sounded from the ball of light, it echoed through the throne hall. Suddenly, a peal of devilish laughter erupted, filling the room with a menacing aura. The laughter came from the ruler of hell himself, who had appeared before the ball of light. He stood tall, with jet-black skin and 3 blazing eyes on his face that pierced through the darkness. His 4 muscular arms hung by his side, each one adorned with a different weapon. A set of large wings sprouted from his back, twitching with excitement as he surveyed his new guest. The ruler's eyes burned with a fierce flame, reflecting the fires of the underworld. His face was twisted in a wicked grin, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. He had no nose, but his nostrils flared as he breathed in the scent of his new prey. His pointed ears twitched, picking up on every sound in the room. With a voice that resonated through the entire throne hall, the four-armed man declared, "Welcome to the depths of hell." The room burst into an eerie light as flames flickered and danced, illuminating the man's imposing form. Suddenly, a burst of flames erupted from every direction, engulfing a small ball of light that hovered in the air. The voice within the ball of light sounded disoriented as it responded, "Hell." The four-armed man laughed devilishly as he explained, "When mortals die in the upper realm, the lucky ones simply cease to exist. But the unfortunate souls end up here in the depths of hell with me." The ball of light seemed to tremble as the man continued, "And you, my dear, are one of the most unfortunate of them all." The flames intensified with a flick of his wrist, casting menacing shadows across the room. The air grew thick with the scent of smoke and brimstone as the man towered over the tiny ball of light, ready to unleash the full force of his infernal powers. As the flames intensified, the ball of light within them flickered and pulsed, almost as if it were alive. The voice within sounded bewildered, unsure of what was happening. "So, am I still alive?" the voice asked tentatively. To the surprise of anyone who might find themselves in such a situation, the voice inside the ball of light rejoiced. It was a strange reaction to the hellish surroundings. "Yes, rejoice with me and pray for your master, the Dark Lord, to come for you," the ruler of hell replied, a wicked gleam in his eye. The ball of light went silent for a moment as if processing the request. The ruler of hell's smile grew wider as he waited, anticipation written all over his twisted face. The voice within the ball of light spoke up, reluctant and unsure. "You know about him?" it asked, referring to Ghost, its friend, and the Dark Lord. The ruler of hell snickered, his four arms flexing as he took a step closer to the flickering orb. "I know everything," he replied with a sinister chuckle. Yes, the voice within the ball of light belonged to Nightmare, the dragon who met his untimely demise at the hands of the possessed Noah. But now, Nightmare existed only as a soul, trapped within the confines of the ball of light that had materialized before the ruler of hell. Nightmare was disoriented and confused, his memories stretching only as far as when Noah plunged a sword through his heart. He had no idea what had transpired since then, but one thing was certain in his mind. He was dead and somehow ended up in hell. Nightmare quivered with fear as the ruler of hell approached, his three blazing eyes glinting with malicious intent. Flames flickered and danced, illuminating the ruler of hell's imposing form as he taunted Nightmare with his eternal suffering. "You are trapped here in my realm," the ruler of hell hissed, his voice echoing through the throne hall. "And there is no escape from the torment that awaits you until the Dark Lord comes for you." Nightmare's soul writhed in agony as the flames intensified, casting menacing shadows across the room. The air grew thick with smoke and the sounds of screams and agony, and Nightmare knew that he was trapped in this eternal nightmare. The ruler of hell grinned wickedly, relishing the terror he had instilled in his new prisoner. He knew he had complete control over Nightmare's soul and would relish in his suffering for as long as he desired. As Nightmare hung in the balance, trapped between life and death, he knew he was in for an eternity of pain and suffering in the depths of hell unless Ghost himself ventured into the realm of hell for him. The agonizing scream of Nightmare echoed through the eerie castle, reverberating off the walls and sending shivers down the spines of all those who heard it. The ruler of hell had been tormenting the dragon's soul for what seemed like an eternity, reveling in the power he held over his captive prisoner. But even the ruler of hell grew tired of the dragon's screams, and he finally relented, allowing Nightmare a brief respite from his endless torture. "You said you know everything," Nightmare growled, his voice laced with pain and anger. "But if you truly knew who was coming for me, you wouldn't dare to continue torturing me like this." "I am counting on his arrival," the ruler of hell growled, his three blazing eyes glinting with malicious intent. "He will pay for what he did to me, but this time I have something he cares about. You, little dragon, are my ticket away from this godforsaken place." The ruler of hell's voice echoed through the throne room, and the very walls seemed to shake with his rage. But despite his ferocious demeanor, there was a hint of desperation in his words. He had spent countless eons trapped in the depths of hell, cut off from his homeworld and everyone he had ever known. And now, finally, he saw a way out. For the ruler of hell, the prospect of returning to his homeworld and seeking revenge on those who had banished him was almost too good to be true. He had lost track of how many thousands of years he had spent in hell, but now he finally had a chance to escape and unleash his wrath on those who had wronged him. Nightmare's soul quivered with fear as the ruler of hell loomed over him, his four muscular arms adorned with deadly weapons. The air grew thick with the stench of sulfur and brimstone, and the flames flickered and danced around them, casting eerie shadows on the walls. But even in the face of such overwhelming terror, Nightmare refused to back down. He knew that Ghost was coming for him and would do everything in his power to ensure that his master arrived in time to save him. As the ruler of Hell laughed maniacally, reveling in his newfound power, Nightmare steeled himself for the torture to come. With a fierce determination burning within him, Nightmare waited for the arrival of Ghost, knowing that only he had the power to defeat the ruler of Hell and set him free from his eternal torment. Chapter 9:13. Pay with Blood. The Grand Hall was filled with an aura of anticipation as the three great clans of the Sea Folk realm, House Howrid, House Bigmag and House Gladrath, gathered to attend the trial by combat. Michael, the Dark Lord, stood at the center of the hall, his presence commanding and intimidating. He patiently waited for the final group to arrive, eager to see who dared to take the spirit child from his realm. Suddenly the space around him distorted once again, and a swirling vortex appeared. Out of the portal stepped a group of mermans, their golden robes shimmering in the light. Their arrogant eyes scanned the hall, exuding an air of superiority that made even the most powerful cultivators in the room feel small. But when their eyes landed on Michael, their expressions shifted to one of stunned disbelief. Gruzel, the man leading the group, was the only one who maintained his composure. He had anticipated the Dark Lord's arrival and had prepared himself accordingly. The mermans floated above the ground, their eyes fixed on the human before them. Michael in turn took a step forward, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning with a dangerous fire. As Gormak's group and Valen's group made way for the Dark Lord, the tension in the hall grew even thicker. Everyone could feel the animosity between the two forces as they met in the center of the room, their gazes locked in a fierce staring contest. Michael's killing intent was palpable, and the mermans could not help but feel a twinge of fear. The silence was deafening as the two faced off. The fate of the two proud houses hung in the balance and all eyes were on them. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as if a single word or action could ignite the spark that would set the entire realm ablaze. For a moment time stood still. The mermans and the Dark Lord were like two opposing forces, ready to collide at any moment. But then Gruzel broke the silence, his voice ringing out across the hall. So they stooped low enough to bring the Dark Lord into our world? Gruzel snickered. His tone was even and unwavering. Michael did not reply, but the look in his eyes said it all. The tension in the room reached its peak, and everyone held their breath, waiting for the inevitable clash between the mermans and the Dark Lord. As Michael took a single step forward, the tension in the hall became palpable. All the other mermans who were poised to defend themselves, suddenly found themselves frozen in place, their eyes fixed on the Dark Lord. Gleelis, Gruzel's best friend, stepped forward to stand beside him, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of the sword dangling at his waist. But Gruzel did not flinch. He stood his ground, his piercing gaze locked with Michael's. A sense of eerie calm surrounded him as if he had anticipated the Dark Lord's arrival all along. Michael leaned forward slightly, his eyes burning with an intense killing intent that could make even the bravest warrior shudder. The merman's apprehension was palpable as they tensed up, ready for whatever was to come. Once I am done with the trial, you will face my trial, and I will be your executioner. Michael's words were spoken with a chilling calmness that belied the danger that he posed. The darkness in the hall seemed to intensify for a moment, causing the mermans to shift uneasily on their feet. There was a deafening silence for a few seconds as Michael and Gruzel continued to stare at each other, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. Finally, Gruzel spoke, his voice laced with a confidence that seemed to come from somewhere deep within. I have been waiting for this day, Dark Lord, he said, his words dripping with a venomous sarcasm that sent shivers down the spines of the other mermans. Gruzel's gaze never wavered as he continued to stare at Michael. It was as if he was daring the Dark Lord to try and make a move against him. The tension in the hall was thick enough to cut with a knife, and everyone present knew that something significant was about to happen. Michael chuckled after hearing Gruzel. The air crackled with tension as Michael's laughter filled the hall, sending chills down the spine of everyone present. The darkness swirled around him like a living entity, its malevolent energy amplifying the Dark Lord's already overwhelming power. Mutrad, who once thought he had witnessed the full extent of Michael's might, knew Gruzel had made an enemy he shouldn't have. In Valen's eyes, the power the Dark Lord possessed was a power beyond comprehension, beyond the limits of what a mere mortal could possess. A cold, deadly calmness took over as Michael's laughter died down. His eyes gleamed with a fiery intensity as he fixed his gaze on the enemy who dared to take something precious from him. You took something precious from me but forgot one important detail. I am the Dark Lord, and those who cross me never live to regret it. Michael's voice was like the sound of ice cracking, sharp and deadly. The atmosphere in the hall turned even darker, as if the very air had turned to stone. Even the bravest of hearts trembled in fear at the Dark Lord's wrath. Michael's power surged, reaching heights no one had ever witnessed. Some of the mermans who had thought they had succeeded in their mission now knew that they had awoken a sleeping dragon, and they would pay dearly for it. At that moment, Mutrad saw the Dark Lord's power reach the half-celestial stage, passing Gruzel's immortal level 10 cultivation. As the tension in the hall reached its peak, a voice that dripped with authority boomed, echoing through the grand space. Michael looked up to see figures materializing before each of the 8 thrones on the elevated platform. We will see how you dare to raise a finger against one of the proud sea folk. The elders, Mutrad mumbled, seeing the elders appear before the thrones one by one. Their presence exuded power and dominance, and their gazes were fixed on Michael with an intensity that made the Mutrad's skin crawl. Clearly, these sea folk took great pride in their heritage, and they weren't going to let anyone, even the Dark Lord, harm one of their own. Each of them was at the immortal stage level 10, but their auras were far stronger than the aura radiating from Gruzel. The 8 elders were an imposing sight, consisting of 3 mermans, 3 wraiths and 2 earthens. Their eyes were fixated on Michael and the others, and their expressions were unreadable. The members of House Big Mag and House Halrid turned their gazes toward the elders, their bodies tensing up in fear. Valen shivered at the thought of asking the Dark Lord's help and how the elders would react. Though they hadn't broken any rules or laws by asking the Dark Lord to represent them in the trial by combat, they feared the wrath of the elders and hoped they wouldn't receive any punishment. The tension in the hall was thick enough to cut with a knife as everyone waited for the elders' response. Michael took a calculated step back, his eyes fixed on the elevated platform where the 8 elders sat in their respective thrones. He was expecting a response from them, but what he didn't expect was their gazes turning towards Valen and Gormak, who had asked for the Dark Lord's help in the trial by combat. The elders knew that the duo had not violated any laws or rules, but their anger was evident as their eyes blazed with fury. They were ashamed that their own descendants had lost their precious artifacts and had to resort to seeking help from the feared Dark Lord. The tension in the hall was palpable, and Michael could feel it crackling in the air. The elders' anger was a living, breathing thing that threatened to engulf the entire room. Michael stood tall, unflinching in the face of their wrath, his eyes blazing with a power that surpassed anything the elders had ever seen before. It was a silent standoff, each side sizing up the other, the stakes high and the consequences of their actions potentially dire. For a moment, no one moved, and the only sound that could be heard was the beating of their hearts. Finally, one of the merman elders spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition and power. The merman elder spoke with a voice dripping with disdain and disappointment. It is a shameful thing to witness 2 houses, who were tasked with protecting the artifacts for thousands of years, lose them under their watch. We will not entertain any excuses no matter how one tries to spin it. Losing the artifacts is not just a mark of shame, it is a sign of weakness. The Wraith Elder's piercing gaze scanned the room before settling on Gormak and Mutrad. And on top of losing the artifacts your ancestors protected for centuries, you have the audacity to invite the Dark Lord into our world, despite knowing the prophecies and the stories of his atrocities? He said in a voice filled with disdain. Gruzel's eyes gleamed with a hidden sense of pleasure as he watched the elders verbally lash out at the leaders of his rival houses. He knew that Valen and Gormak had thought bringing in the Dark Lord was a smart move, but they were unaware of the elders' power to change the rules of the trial by combat. Gruzel relished in their downfall and waited to see what fate the elders would bestow upon them. One of the Wraith elders spoke with a kind yet stern voice. There are some actions that one should refrain from, even if they do not violate any laws or rules. Your decision to seek the Dark Lord's aid in this matter is ill-advised and could have dire consequences for our world. He paused for a moment and continued, we must hear your reasoning for this choice. Why did you seek the help of the Dark Lord instead of relying on the strongest warriors from your own houses? The elder gave Valen and Gormak an opportunity to explain themselves, showing a willingness to listen before making any judgments. Valen stepped forward and lifted his head to meet the elder's gazes. I will not make any excuses for the loss of our artifact, he began. But we did not anticipate that a powerful ritual would be conducted using the blood of a spirit child to break the array that protected our artifacts. Valen's words were like a sudden bolt of lightning that struck the elders, leaving them momentarily stunned. The merman elder's face was etched with a deep frown, his eyes narrow with suspicion. What proof do you have to support this allegation, Gormak? asked the elder, his voice laced with skepticism. Gormak stood tall and confident as he answered, "Once we retrieve our artifacts, I will use the artifact of House Big Mag. If someone had used the blood of a spirit child, our artifact would find the spirit child." The elders exchanged uncertain glances, their minds racing as they considered the implications of Gormak's statement. "But that doesn't explain why you felt the need to invite the Dark Lord to our world," another elder, a wraith, spoke up. Before Gormak could answer, Michael stepped forward with a chilling declaration. "Because the spirit child was taken away from his home by one of your people." The room fell silent as the weight of Michael's words settled upon them. The tension in the air was palpable as the elders grappled with the severity of the situation. "What proof do you have for that claim?" the merman elder snarled, his eyes fixed on Michael, who stood with a calm expression. "Proof?" Michael's voice was low and dangerous, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. "I don't need proof. I will find the one who took the spirit child and make them pay with their blood and the blood of anyone who dared to stand with them. The water will turn red with their blood, and their screams will echo through history for eternity." Chapter 9:14. 20 million experience points. A sense of unease pervaded the hall as the elders contemplated the Dark Lord's chilling warning. They knew that they were no match for his power, and their limited options left them feeling vulnerable and exposed. The three great halls of the Water God, Sea Serpent and Arctic were known for their peaceful ways, which kept them strong and united. They despised war and conflict, knowing that any disturbance in their realm would have far-reaching consequences. And yet, if the Dark Lord were to attack them, they would have no choice but to defend themselves. They knew that if they managed to defeat the Dark Lord, it would come at a great cost to their power and influence. But if they didn't fight, they would be seen as weak and vulnerable, and other factions might take advantage of their perceived weakness. The elders exchanged uneasy glances, each silently acknowledging the gravity of the situation. They were treading on dangerous ground, and the outcome was uncertain. Yet they had no choice but to stand up to the Dark Lord and defend their honor and their people. As the tension in the hall mounted, the elders steeled themselves for the inevitable confrontation, bracing for the worst yet hoping for the best. The fate of their world hung in the balance, and they knew that they could not afford to fail. Impatience flickered in Michael's eyes as he awaited the elders to explain the rules and laws of the trial by combat. He was anxious to retrieve Harry and use the artifact of House Big Mag to locate him. The elders exchanged worried glances before the merman elder cleared his throat and began. "Following are the rules of this trial by combat. The House of Gladwrath has placed their artifact in the ocean behind us." He gestured towards the shimmering waters behind them, separated by a glass wall. To win the trial and retrieve the lost artifacts, the challenged, the Dark Lord, must move through the sea and take the artifact of the House of Gladwrath. However, the challenged is restricted to using only 3 spells. 1 for speed, 1 for defense and 1 for attack, the elder finished, watching the faces of the participants. Valen, Mutrad, and House Big Mag looked surprised as they had not anticipated such limitations for the challenged. Michael remained composed, understanding that the restriction on spells was not a significant obstacle for him. "The rules are clear, and the elders can dictate the battlefield and the challenged." The merman elder spoke with finality, silencing any objections. The wraith elder stepped forward to add, "Once you move into the waters, the cultivation level of all beings in the water will be suppressed to the half-immortal stage." It was a standard rule, but Michael was not affected. He had faith in his powers and knew that 3 spells were enough to defeat any opponent. Valen and the others exchanged apprehensive glances. They knew the elders had punished them by making the trial even more difficult, but they could not question the decision. The consequences of doing so were dire. Michael's eyes glinted with determination as he stepped toward the glass wall separating him from the ocean. "Let's get this over with." "I don't have much patience," he spoke with a hint of annoyance, eager to retrieve Harry. The elders nodded in agreement and simultaneously raised their hands in the air. In that moment, a vortex appeared before the glass wall, and Michael knew it was time to make his move. With a swift motion, he willed the APD to inject a pill that would enable him to breathe underwater directly into his bloodstream. As the tingling sensation spread throughout his body, Michael's back began to feel like it was on fire. Suddenly, gills appeared behind his ears, and skin grew between his fingers, enabling him to move through the water with the grace and speed of a fish. The sight was nothing short of awe-inspiring, as Michael's form seemed to blur as he dived into the vortex and into the deep blue sea beyond. The elders watched in silent awe, knowing that they had just sent one of the most dangerous beings in their realm into a battle that would surely test his limits. After Michael disappeared into the swirling waters, the elders turned to each other with tense expressions. When Michael swam deeper into the ocean, the pressure increased and his ears started ringing. It was like the ocean was trying to crush him with its immense weight. However, he refused to let the pressure get the best of him. His gills worked like a charm and he was able to breathe without any trouble. He noticed that the water was devoid of any signs of life as he swam further. It was as if the ocean had been stripped of its inhabitants. The eerie silence was broken only by the sound of his heartbeat. The anticipation in the hall was palpable as everyone watched Michael's progress with bated breath. The merman elder whispered to the other elders, "Do you think the Dark Lord will succeed?" Michael continued to swim further and further, scanning his surroundings for any signs of the artifact. The ocean was vast and he knew that he had a long way to go. The thought of Harry's fate drove him forward. As Michael approached the shimmering artifact, he noticed a group of half-immortals lurking in the shadows, waiting to ambush him. Using his environmental scanning ability, Michael identified the presence of 20 half-immortals and something far more powerful than them lurking in the dark waters around the artifact. Upon getting closer to the artifact, Michael observed it was in the shape of a triangle with a golden sun built inside, pulsating with powerful energy. However, his attention was swiftly drawn to the entity lurking in the shadows, which he sensed was the guardian of the artifact, the one Mutrad had warned him about. Despite the danger, Michael remained composed and prepared to face whatever lay ahead. His X-ray vision allowed him to see through the darkness and anticipate the attacks of the half-immortals. Michael halted in his tracks and unsheathed his dark swords. The blades crackled with red lightning, illuminating the surrounding water with an eerie glow. Without any warning, Michael dashed towards a lurking half-immortal with lightning-fast speed, using his lightning dash technique. His figure blurred as he moved through the water like a bolt of lightning. The half-immortal was caught off guard and paid the ultimate price, losing its head to Michael's swift strike. The water around them turned from a serene blue to a violent red, stained with the half-immortal's blood. The other half-immortals lurking in the shadows quickly realized that Michael had sensed their ambush and was prepared to defend himself. Feeling the weight of their guardian's protection, the half-immortals summoned their cultivation techniques, each unleashing their own unique powers. Despite the overwhelming odds, Michael remained calm and focused, his eyes locked on the pulsating artifact. He knew that the guardian was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But first he had to take out these pesky half-immortals. Michael could feel the water around him churning as the half-immortals began to unleash their spells. The first one shot a powerful water blast towards Michael, who managed to dodge it by quickly moving to the side. As he did so, the water around him rippled, creating a whirlpool. Another half-immortal created a bubble around Michael, trapping him inside only to see Michael cut the bubble like it was nothing using his dark swords. Meanwhile, the third half-immortal cast a spell that created a powerful gust of wind, pushing Michael back. Michael managed to keep his footing, but the wind was so strong that it almost knocked him off balance for a moment. The fourth half-immortal shot a beam of light towards Michael, which he barely managed to block with his dark swords. The light was blinding and Michael had to close his eyes for a moment. Michael could feel the pressure building up around him as more and more half-immortals joined the battle. The half-immortals were relentless in their attacks, but Michael remained focused and prepared to strike back. His eyes turned pitch black and dark energy began to emanate from his body. Suddenly, dark beams shot out from his eyes, penetrating through the chest of a half-immortal and leaving a gaping hole. The half-immortal with a gaping hole in his chest writhed in agony as Michael's attack spell hit him. He tried to react, but Michael dashed at him before he could, his dark sword cutting through the water like a hot knife through butter. In one swift motion, Michael cleaved the half-immortal's head clean off his shoulders. Blood spurted out in all directions, turning the water around them into a crimson red. The other half-immortals paused their attacks for a moment and looked at Michael in awe and fear. His devilish grin and the way he crushed the head with his bare hand to a pulp sent shivers down their spines. They knew then that they were facing a truly formidable opponent, one who had no qualms about taking their lives. But the battle was far from over. The remaining half-immortals, emboldened by their numbers, launched a coordinated attack on Michael. Spells of lightning and fire shot toward him, but Michael was too quick for them. He deflected them with his dark swords, sending them back at his attackers. The water around them churned and boiled with the intensity of the battle, and Michael's eyes burned with a fierce determination. Michael increased his speed after taking out the half-immortal and pushed himself to the limit. The other half-immortals could barely see him as he moved like a blur through the water. They continued to bombard him with spells, but Michael's responsive shield absorbed the attacks and his godly body protected him from any direct hits. Although some spells managed to graze Michael, they were nowhere close to slowing him down. His eyes glinted with excitement as he darted between the half-immortals, his dark swords flashing in the water. The half-immortals grew more and more desperate, realizing that their spells were no match for Michael's power. But Michael knew that he could not let his guard down. One wrong move could mean his demise. He remained alert and focused, anticipating their attacks and dodging with lightning-fast reflexes. The water around them turned red with the blood of the fallen half-immortals, a testament to Michael's power and skill in battle. Michael was aware that the half-immortals were weaker than him, but he refused to underestimate them. His seemingly calm and careless demeanor hid the fact that he was completely focused on the battle. Michael moved through the water, shooting dark beams out of his eyes and swinging his dark swords with deadly precision. He anticipated their spells and moved like a bolt of lightning before the spells could hit him, cleaving their heads off one by one. Despite his strength, Michael didn't let his guard down. He knew that even the weakest half-immortal could be deadly if given the opportunity. He was like a shark in a feeding frenzy, moving through the water with deadly grace and speed. The water around them turned red with the blood of the half-immortals as Michael continued his assault. He seemed unstoppable, taking out one after the other with ease. But even as the battle raged on, Michael remained focused, never once letting his guard down. Valen and the others were watching the battle from the glass wall with bated breath. They gasped and murmured among themselves as they saw Michael take out one half-immortal after another. Gormak was equally shocked but also impressed. "He's much more powerful than we anticipated," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Valen nodded in agreement. "He's like a force of nature," he said, his eyes fixed on Michael's figure as he moved through the water with deadly precision. The elders looked on with mixed emotions, impressed by Michael's power but also concerned about the repercussions of the trial. "This trial may have consequences beyond what we anticipated," said the merman elder with a furrowed brow. But Michael continued his onslaught, determined to retrieve the artifact and find Harry. His dark swords glinted in the water as he moved, a blur of power and precision. The half-immortals had no chance against him. Chapter 9:15. Fighting a giant underwater with the water around him now stained red from the blood of the defeated half-immortals, Michael approached the shimmering artifact of House Gladrath with caution. He knew that the guardian of the artifact was lurking somewhere in the dark waters and he remained alert for any sign of movement. As Michael drew closer to the artifact, he felt the temperature of the water rising and strong ripples in the water around him. Suddenly, a giant eye opened in the water, staring directly at Michael. The eye was enormous, easily several times larger than Michael himself. Its pupil was an eerie shade of green that seemed to glow in the dark water. The creature that possessed the eye was massive, its size almost impossible to comprehend. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered in the dim light. Its snake-like body stretched out for what seemed like miles, and its massive tail whipped through the water with immense power. Its jaws were lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth, ready to tear apart anything that dared to challenge it. As Michael stood in front of the creature, he felt a sense of dread wash over him. He had never seen anything like this before, and he knew that he was no match for it in terms of size and brute strength. But he remained focused, knowing he had come too far to back down. The giant belonged to the rare and powerful race of giants in the sea realm. They were considered the most powerful race and the first to inhabit the deep oceans. According to ancient scripts, all the other races in the sea realm had descended from them. When the giant guardian noticed Michael trying to take the artifact, it didn't attack him immediately. Instead, it let out a deafening roar, creating giant waves in the water. The warning clearly indicated the creature's intelligence, and Michael knew that the guardian was not to be underestimated. If it had been a mindless creature, it would have attacked him already. For a few moments Michael remained still, his eyes locked onto the giant creature. Despite its size, Michael didn't feel intimidated. He sensed a strange power emanating from the giant, and he knew that it could break out of the array if it wanted to. Finally Michael spoke up. "I'm going to take this artifact." "Back off," he warned the creature, his voice steady and unwavering. The giant let out another deafening roar, creating more waves in the water. Michael stood his ground, ready to face whatever the creature had in store for him. The other elders and their entourages watched in awe and fear, wondering what would happen next. Time seemed to slow down as Michael cautiously extended his hand toward the artifact. But the moment his fingers made contact, the giant roared with fury, unleashing a powerful force that sent Michael hurtling backward through the water. The impact caused intense vibrations that rattled his inner organs and he coughed up blood. With a fierce determination, Michael willed the APD to inject a healing potion into his body, determined not to let this setback defeat him. "So you choose violence?" Michael's voice echoed through the ocean, a challenge in his tone. Despite the overwhelming power of the giant, Michael refused to back down. The giant remained silent for a few moments, its massive eye locked onto Michael's smaller form. As Michael looked up at the giant creature, he felt a sense of awe and fear overwhelm him. The creature was easily 10 times the size of a blue whale, the largest animal in the world. Its skin was a deep shade of black and had a rough texture, with several protruding spikes along its back. Its eyes were bright red, with slitted pupils that seemed to bore into Michael's soul. The creature moved with a fluid grace that belied its enormous size. Each time it moved, it created massive ripples in the water, sending smaller sea creatures scurrying away in fear. As it roared, the water around it seemed to vibrate with a powerful force that threatened to knock Michael off his feet. As the giant creature moved toward Michael, the people in the hall watched in awe and terror. They had never seen anything like it before. Valen and the other members of House Big Mag were particularly shocked by the size and power of the giant. "What kind of creature is that?" Valen muttered under his breath. The sight of the giant creature sent a shiver down the spines of those in the hall. Even House Big Mag and House Howrid, who had their own giant guardians, were awestruck by the sheer size of the creature before them. Its immense body was unlike anything they had ever seen, and the way it moved through the water sent ripples throughout the ocean. Michael remained still, his mind racing as he formed a plan to defeat the giant guardian. The scales and body of the creature looked too tough to be penetrated by a single shot of his dark beams. He was curious to see what effect his dark swords would have when he tried to cut the giant creature. Despite its monstrous size, the giant guardian was incredibly agile and fast. In the blink of an eye, it closed the gap between them and opened its massive jaws. The sight of the giant's razor-sharp teeth caused a ripple of fear to spread through the spectators in the hall. Valen, Mutrad, and the others watched with bated breath, their hearts racing as they witnessed the battle unfold before their eyes. "Can he defeat that thing?" Valen asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. "I don't know," Mutrad replied, his eyes fixed on the giant guardian. "But if anyone can do it, it's him." The tension in the hall was palpable as Michael stood his ground, waiting for the creature to make a move. The spectators, except House Gladrath in the hall, may have feared and hated the Dark Lord, but they couldn't help but root for him in the battle against the monstrous giant. They knew that the fate of their houses depended on his victory in the trial. Meanwhile, Michael remained focused on the task at hand, his two swords clutched tightly in his hands. As the giant creature opened its massive jaw, Michael quickly dodged out of the way, narrowly avoiding being swallowed whole by the beast. The giant was incredibly agile and fast, despite its massive size, and Michael knew that he couldn't afford to let his guard down for even a moment. He darted through the water, his dark swords at the ready, searching for a weakness in the creature's defenses. The giant creature seemed to rely solely on its massive size and brute strength, lacking any ability to cast spells. But its sheer size was already a huge advantage, and Michael knew he was in a tough battle. When he dodged the creature's jaw, it simply swung its spiked tail and sent Michael hurtling through the water. The spikes penetrated Michael's skin, causing intense pain, but he did not show any fear. Instead, he felt a rush of excitement at the prospect of facing such a massive creature underwater. Despite the pain, Michael quickly regained his composure and assessed his options. His dark beams had proved ineffective against the giant creature's tough scales, but he still had one weapon left to try, his dark swords. Without hesitation, Michael charged at the creature with his swords at the ready. The creature swung its tail again, but Michael was ready this time. He skillfully dodged the spikes and sliced at the creature's scales with his swords. To Michael's surprise, the dark swords were able to penetrate the creature's tough hide. The giant creature roared in pain as Michael continued to slash at it, causing deep wounds. The water around them turned red as the creature bled profusely. The people in the hall were on the edge of their seats as they watched the intense battle unfold. The sound of clashing swords and roaring echoed through the water, adding to the drama of the scene. Some of them were amazed at Michael's skill and courage, while others were terrified by the sheer size and power of the giant creature. Michael's dark swords cut deep with each slash, leaving marks on the giant guardian's body. But even with his strength and skill, the cuts seemed insignificant compared to the creature's massive size. Despite this, Michael did not give up and continued to fight with all his might. On his 10th strike, the giant creature let out a deafening roar and swung its body, hitting Michael with tremendous force and sending him hurtling through the water once again. This time the creature did not give Michael any chance to recover. It let out a series of powerful roars, sending shockwaves through the water and hitting Michael with incredible force. The impact was like being hit by a freight train, causing Michael to cough up blood and feel immense pain throughout his body. Despite this, he did not let go of his swords and remained determined to defeat the giant creature. With lightning-fast reflexes, Michael managed to dodge the giant creature's attacks, but the creature was relentless in its pursuit. Suddenly, the creature increased its speed, moving with astonishing agility and appearing before Michael in the blink of an eye. Michael tried to dodge out of the way, but it was too late. The giant opened its massive jaws, ready to snap Michael up in its mouth. But Michael was not one to give up without a fight. With fierce determination, he plunged his dark sword into the creature's upper jaw and used his raw brute strength to keep the creature from closing its mouth completely. The creature roared in pain and anger, thrashing about in the water and trying to shake Michael off. Despite the danger, Michael remained focused and held on tight to his sword, gritting his teeth as he struggled to keep the creature's jaws open. He knew that one wrong move could mean the end for him, but he refused to give up. Arg! With a burst of adrenaline, Michael summoned all his strength and pushed the creature back, managing to free himself from its deadly grip. Breathless and battered, Michael knew that the battle was far from over. But he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 9:16. Michael meets Harry. Michael's fate seemed sealed as the giant creature finally managed to close its massive jaws, enclosing him within. The onlookers in the hall were stunned and a hush fell over the room as they watched in horror. Members of House Gladrath, including Jealous and Gruzel, wickedly smiled, thinking that the Dark Lord's body would be melted inside the giant's acid stomach. House Bigmag and House Howrid looked pale and shivered at the thought of losing the trial by combat and being exiled from the Arctic Hall. But suddenly the giant creature roared in pain. Its belly radiated a dim glow and started to churn, as if something inside it was fighting back. The creature's roar sounded more like a cry of agony than one of anger. The members of House Gladrath were bewildered, while House Bigmag and House Howrid watched in amazement as the giant creature's belly began to bulge and change shape. The giant creature started to swim around the artifact in a frenzy, barrel rolling and thrashing about wildly. Suddenly, it stopped moving and opened its jaw for a long, piercing howl. The water around them vibrated with the force of the sound waves. Then, to everyone's shock, Michael shot right out of the giant's mouth, covered in red goo and blood from the creature's insides. As soon as Michael escaped the giant's belly, he and the creature locked eyes as if communicating wordlessly. Mutrad watched in awe, wondering what kind of unspoken message was being exchanged between them. But the surprise wasn't over yet. Instead of attacking Michael or trying to reclaim the artifact, the giant creature swam away from it, leaving Michael to claim it without resistance. This sight shocked House Gladrath and left the elders confused and speechless. Meanwhile, Michael wasted no time and quickly swam toward the artifact. As soon as he touched it, the artifact vibrated in his hand and then, to everyone's amazement, two more artifacts materialized in the water beside him. One was a scepter made of emerald and decorated with rubies and other gems, while the other was a mysterious, icy blue metal orb with no visible designs or markings. The elders and members of the Arctic Hall were left in utter shock at the sight of the Dark Lord's victory over the giant guardian. They had never seen such a fierce battle before, and the fact that Michael emerged victorious over such a massive creature was truly astonishing. The shock on their faces was evident as they stared at Michael, completely speechless. "Unbelievable," muttered one of the elders under his breath. "I've never seen anything like this before," said another, his eyes wide with disbelief. But the biggest shock came when the giant, instead of protecting the artifact, simply swam away. The members of House Gladrath were completely confused, and the elders were at a loss for words. "Why did the giant leave the artifact?" asked one of the elders, breaking the stunned silence that had filled the hall. "I don't know," replied another, shaking his head in disbelief. "But it must have had a good reason." The mysterious reason behind the giant's departure left everyone in the hall with more questions than answers. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of confusion and wonder as they tried to make sense of what had just happened. As Michael appeared in the hall with the three artifacts, the members of House Gladrath, except Gruzel, looked stunned and confused. They had lost their own artifact, yet their leader, Gruzel, did not show any sign of shock. Instead, he remained calm and composed as if he had expected this outcome. The others in the hall noticed his reaction and began to frown and murmur to each other. They could not understand how their leader could be so composed in the face of such a devastating loss. One of the members from House Howrid whispered, "How can he be so calm? They just lost their artifact." Another member from House Big Mag added, "Maybe he had a backup plan? This seems fishy." As Michael held the 3 artifacts in his hands, he turned to face the elders, who were visibly stunned by his victory over the giant guardian. A mixture of shock and admiration filled the hall as the Dark Lord stared at them with a calm expression. The elders quickly regained their composure and flicked their wrists, causing a spatial vortex to appear before Michael. Without hesitation, Michael stepped into the vortex and disappeared, leaving the elders to discuss his triumph in hushed tones. The other houses in the Arctic Hall were equally stunned by Michael's victory and the appearance of the artifacts. Some whispered in fear and others in awe, as they wondered what this meant for the upcoming trial. As for Michael, he reappeared in the hall holding the artifacts tightly in his hands. The emerald scepter and icy blue metal orb radiated with a powerful energy that filled the room. Michael's dark swords were also pulsating with a red lightning bolt energy, which caused some of the weaker members in the room to back away. The silence was broken by Valen's voice, who spoke in a tone filled with reverence and relief. "The Dark Lord has emerged victorious, and with the artifacts in his possession, he is the winner of the trial by combat." The room erupted with murmurs of agreement and admiration as they watched Michael with a mixture of fear and respect. Michael stood tall and composed in the center of the room, his eyes scanning the faces of the gathered elders. His expression remained unreadable, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his gaze as he locked eyes with Gruzel, who couldn't help but shiver under his intense scrutiny. Michael's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere in the hall, with everyone on edge waiting for the outcome of the trial. Without a word, Michael handed over the 3 artifacts to the Merman Elder, who took them with a nod of acknowledgement. The members of House Big Mag and House Howrid moved closer, their eyes fixed on the artifacts with anticipation. Meanwhile, Gruzel couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. He knew they had made an enemy out of the Dark Lord for nothing, and it was clear that they would face the wrath of the Dark Lord one way or another. As the elders verified the authenticity of the artifacts, the tension in the room reached its peak. The silence was deafening as everyone waited for the verdict. Finally, the Merman Elder nodded in confirmation and handed the artifacts back to Michael. The members of House Big Mag and House Howrid breathed a collective sigh of relief and made their way to the elders to begin their end of the bargain. Meanwhile, Gruzel and the other members of House Gladrath stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The atmosphere in the Arctic Hall was tense as the Merman Elder spoke. "House Big Mag and House Howrid have won the trial by combat," he declared. "Their artifact will be returned to them. I hope this time they will be able to protect it and avoid seeking the Dark Lord's help." His displeasure with the 2 houses seeking the Dark Lord's help was evident. The Merman Elder then turned his attention to Gruzel, the leader of House Gladrath. He knew that the disappearance of the artifacts was connected to a ritual that involved using a spirit child's blood. Although House Big Mag and House Howrid didn't directly accuse House Gladrath of kidnapping the spirit child and using its blood for the ritual, the elder could sense the implication. After all, how else could House Gladrath have come into possession of the artifacts and challenged the other 2 houses to a trial by combat? If House Gladrath really used a spirit child's blood to steal the artifacts, we will get to the bottom of it, the Merman Elder declared firmly. Their actions have resulted in House Howrid and House Big Mag seeking the Dark Lord's help. We will not stand for such desperate and reckless behavior. The other elders nodded in agreement, their expressions stern. The Merman Elder continued, "We, the elders of the proud Arctic Hall, will not tolerate such actions. We will find out who is responsible and they will face the consequences of their actions." Gruzel looked uneasy under the elder's intense gaze. He knew that House Gladrath would be under close scrutiny from now on and that they would have to tread carefully if they wanted to avoid being punished. Michael paid no attention to the elders and their threats. Instead, he turned his steely gaze towards Valen and Gormak. "I have fulfilled my end of the bargain. It's time for you to fulfill yours," Michael said, his tone stern and commanding. Valen, clearly uncomfortable in the elders' presence, quickly suggested they relocate somewhere else. But the elders had other plans. "No, we would like to see the truth of your claims," said one of the elders firmly. Michael shot a triumphant look over his shoulder at Gruzel and the members of House Gladrath. "Your little game is about to come to an end," he snickered, relishing in his victory. Gormak wasted no time and reached out his hand as the icy blue orb floated toward him and landed on his palm. "Put a drop of your blood on the sphere," Gormak instructed, his eyes fixed on Michael. Without hesitation, Michael drew the dark sword and sliced his palm, letting the blood drip onto the orb. As soon as the blood touched the surface, the orb lit up with a pulsating glow. The temperature rose steadily until Gormak's hand started to burn, but he held on tightly to the artifact. Suddenly, a spatial vortex appeared in the hall, catching everyone's attention. Michael was taken aback. He thought the orb would only show the location of Harry, not open a portal to his whereabouts. Michael hesitated to step into the portal, fearing that it might be a trap set by the Dark Lord's enemies. Instead, he summoned a drone and commanded it to fly through the portal to scout the other side. Mutrad, however, had mixed emotions as he observed the scene. He couldn't help feeling a sense of awe at the Dark Lord's power and intelligence, but also a hint of fear and unease at the thought of being on his bad side. As Michael finally made his way towards the portal, Mutrad saw a sudden flash of rage and shock in his eyes, as if something had caught him off guard. The tension in the hall was palpable as everyone waited anxiously to see what the drone would uncover on the other side of the portal. As Michael stepped out of the portal, the world around him seemed to shift and change. He found himself standing in a grand hall, with high ceilings and few furnishings. In the center of the room, a young woman with black hair and blue robes was reading a book to a small child who looked to be no more than 4 or 5 years old. But as soon as she saw Michael, the book slipped from her grasp and her eyes turned a menacing shade of red. Her fists clenched as she glared at the Dark Lord, who stood cold and imposing in front of her. The child looked up at the commotion. Confusion etched on his face as he watched the stranger in front of him. Michael didn't flinch, even as the woman's anger radiated off of her like waves. He simply looked at her with a stoic expression, waiting for her to make the first move. It was none other than Edith Alden, the sister of Layla Alden. Michael last saw Edith when he killed her best friend, Victoria Barnes. After that incident, Edith disappeared from the face of the world, leaving no trace behind. As Michael stood there, staring at Edith, the child beside her looked up at him curiously. The child was unaware of the tension between Michael and Edith, and his innocent eyes sparkled with curiosity. As Michael was staring at Edith, the elders and everyone else in the hall stepped out of the portal. The atmosphere in the hall became tense as suddenly, Michael turned around and dashed at Gruzel. With lightning-fast speed he grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. The other members of House Gladrath were shocked and froze in place as they watched the Dark Lord's rage. The elders were quick to react, raising their hands to cast spells to stop Michael, but he merely flicked his wrist, sending a shockingly powerful wind blast that sent the elders flying. With a wicked grin on his face, Gruzel taunted Michael. "You wanted to know who took your spirit child? Look no further. She took him." "You wanted me to see this?" Michael hissed, his voice low and dangerous. Gruzel laughed again, enjoying the sight of the Dark Lord losing his composure. "Yes," he said confidently. "What are you going to do about it, Dark Lord?" "You cannot kill her." Michael's grip on Gruzel intensified and he pulled him closer to his face. "I will deal with you later," he growled. Michael's eyes were fixed on Edith as he knocked out Gruzel with a single punch to the face. Then he turned his attention back to Edith and unleashed another wind blast, knocking out everyone else in the room, leaving only the child standing before him and Edith. The child had black hair that fell in gentle waves around his face, and his skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the room. He had hazel eyes, much like his mother, Layla, and a slight resemblance to Michael, though he looked more like his mother. "Leaving you alive was a mistake," Michael said in a low and icy tone, causing Harry to feel a sudden wave of fear and confusion wash over him. Despite his young age, Harry could sense the dangerous aura radiating from the stranger before him. He instinctively looked at Edith for comfort and reached out to her, gently grabbing her hand with his soft and tiny fingers. Chapter 9:17. Fate of Edith. Harry, despite his young age, stepped forward in front of Edith, standing his ground like a loyal soldier. Under any other circumstances, Michael might have found the child's courage endearing. But in that moment he was consumed by rage. Edith had put Harry's life in danger simply to seek revenge. Michael couldn't forgive such a reckless act. Ignoring Harry completely, Michael began to approach Layla. As Michael advanced, Edith felt a fierce rage coursing through her veins. The memories of Michael's brutal massacre of her best friend Victoria and her family flooded her mind. Michael had destroyed everything she held dear in a matter of days, tearing apart her entire life. But while the world trembled before the fearsome power of the Dark Lord, Edith refused to back down. Her anger was so intense that it dwarfed any sense of fear. The others, including the elders, struggled to get back on their feet after being knocked out by the wind blast. Some of them mustered their strength and used arch energy to heal their bodies, but their attempts were futile. A ring of flames as dark as midnight suddenly appeared around Michael, enclosing Edith and Harry within. The intense heat of the dark flames kept the others from getting closer to Michael and Edith. Despite meeting Michael's eyes filled with cold murderous intent, Edith remained firm, refusing to cower in fear. Her anger burned hotter than the dark flames themselves, fueling her determination to face Michael head-on. The two dark swords on Michael's back started to tremble as they had a mind of their own. They struggled to fly out of the sheath and land in Michael's hands, sensing his overwhelming rage. In Michael's anger, he didn't even bother to check on Harry or even talk to him for the first time in his life. Instead, Michael locked his gaze on Edith, his eyes filled with a cold, menacing intensity that sent shivers down her spine. The air around them crackled with tension, and it was clear that this confrontation was about to come to a violent end. Michael's gaze remained fixed on Edith, his eyes glinting with chilling intensity. "You used him to avenge your friend and her family," he said coldly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you going to do? Kill me like you killed all those innocent people?" Edith snickered, turning her attention to Harry, who watched the exchange with wide eyes. "Did you or did you not know someone was sent to kill your sister?" Michael asked, his voice steady and unwavering. To his surprise, Edith showed no signs of shock or surprise. "Not everyone's a murderer like you," Edith replied, her voice dripping with venom. "Do you know why I didn't kill you?" Michael asked, his tone as icy as his gaze. He waited for a response, but when none came, he continued. "As much as you annoyed me, you did nothing wrong until you decided to use him to seek revenge against me. I should have known being with that bitch would have corrupted your soul." The word bitch was like a match to a powder keg. Edith's anger exploded, and she raised her hand to slap Michael with all her might. The sound of the slap echoed through the hall, making Harry jump in fright. Edith grabbed Michael by his collar and shook him, her eyes blazing with fury. Edith's voice was thick with rage as she stared defiantly at Michael. Her eyes blazed with an intensity that matched the dark flames that surrounded them. "How dare you speak ill of Victoria's memory? She was a kind and compassionate person, unlike you, a soulless murderer," she spat out. Michael's jaw clenched at her words, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he hissed. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Edith shot back, her voice laced with venom. "You destroyed everything I loved, and for what? Your sick, twisted sense of justice?" The air around them crackled with tension, and Harry watched with wide eyes, unsure of what was happening. Edith stood before them, unafraid and defiant, her eyes blazing with a fury that matched Michael's. "Kill me," she hissed, "and show your son what you really are." At the sound of those words, Harry's heart stopped. He looked up at Michael, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. This man, who had been a stranger just moments ago, was his father. The revelation was almost too much to bear, and Harry felt like he was about to be sick. He wanted to run to his father to feel the safety of his embrace, but the fear that gripped him was stronger. Michael turned to look at his son, and the cold, murderous intent that had been radiating from him seemed to dissipate slightly. He could see the fear in Harry's eyes, the confusion and the pain, which was like a punch to the gut. How could he explain to his son that he was the Dark Lord? How could he make him understand everything that turned him into this? Michael stood in front of Edith, his eyes filled with rage as she taunted him. "Show your dark spawn the way of your life," she sneered, her words hitting Michael like a blow to the gut. Michael's anger flared up, and he turned to face Edith, his voice low and dangerous. "You will not call him that," he growled, his eyes locking onto hers. Harry watched in shock as the two adults argued and taunted each other. The man standing before him was his father, but he was also a monster who had killed innocent people. Harry felt caught in the middle of a storm, unable to move or speak as he tried to process everything that was happening. The air around them crackled with tension as Michael and Edith faced off, their gazes locked in a battle of wills. Harry could feel the weight of their anger and hatred pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. He wanted to run to escape the chaos and the pain, but he couldn't move. Michael had made the difficult decision to sever his connection with Harry, not because he didn't love his son, but because he wanted to protect him from the dangers that came with being the son of the Dark Lord. Michael had grown up as an orphan himself and knew firsthand the difficulties that came with it. He didn't want Harry and Layla to suffer the same fate. Michael knew that if anyone discovered Harry's true identity, they would stop at nothing to hunt him down. He had made the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of his son's safety, but all of it seemed to be for nothing now that Edith had crossed the line and put Harry's life in danger. On the other hand, Harry felt like he was caught in the middle of a storm, unable to move or speak. The man before him was his father, but he was also a monster. He didn't know what to do or what to say, and he could only watch as the two adults argued and taunted each other. As Harry's eyes darted back and forth between the two arguing adults, he suddenly felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. It was like tiny insects crawling over his skin, and before he could even process what was happening, he felt a sharp, searing pain. It was like a lightning bolt had struck him, and then everything went dark. Edith's attention immediately shifted to Harry as he collapsed to the floor. She rushed to his side and checked his pulse, her heart pounding with fear. She had not intended to harm the child, but the sight of Michael had ignited something in her that she could not control. Now, as she looked down at the unconscious boy, she felt a deep sense of regret and guilt. Michael's eyes glowed with killing intent as he slowly unsheathed his dark sword. The metal glinted in the light of the flames, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He knew what he had to do, what Edith's actions had forced him to do. With a cold, emotionless voice, he spoke the words that sealed Edith's fate. "I should have killed you a long time ago." Without hesitation, Michael plunged the sword straight into Edith's gut. Blood spurted out of the wound and dripped from the corners of her mouth, staining her clothes and the ground beneath her. Michael didn't say anything else or ask her any more questions. He knew what he had to do, and he did it without remorse. In that moment, Edith was no longer just an annoyance. She was a potential enemy, someone with enough grudge to put her own family in danger for the sake of revenge. An enemy like her couldn't be left alone. As Michael pushed the sword deeper, Edith leaned in towards him, a devilish grin on her face. He grabbed her hair and pulled her off his body, his eyes glowing with dark energy. With a single burst of power, he fired dark beams straight into Edith's head, taking her life immediately. A smoking hole appeared in the center of her forehead, and she fell to the ground beside unconscious Harry. Michael ignored the system notification of Edith's death and drowned at the moment. For a moment there was only silence. Michael stood there, his sword still dripping with blood, looking down at Edith's lifeless body. He had done what he had to do, but he couldn't shake the feeling that all this could have been avoided if Edith had stayed away from Harry. With a heavy heart, he looked at Harry as his anger slowly faded away, looking at his innocent face. Michael knelt down beside his unconscious son, his heart heavy with worry and regret. He gently brushed Harry's face with his hand, his fingers lingering on his son's soft cheeks. For a brief moment, the Dark Lord within Michael disappeared, and the more gentle side of him came out. He felt a rush of love and protectiveness towards his son and wished he could shield him from all the darkness and danger of the world. But that side of him disappeared as soon as he saw Gruzel through the ring of dark flames. As the ring of fire dissipated, Michael stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. His eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to consume him, and Gruzel and Gleelis both took a step back in fear. The air around Michael crackled with dark energy, and he unsheathed his second dark sword, holding both weapons with a steady grip. Gleelis saw the rage in Michael's eyes and knew that he had to prepare to fight for Gruzel's life. The two swords on Michael's back trembled with a mind of their own, eager to be wielded by their master. The ground beneath their feet shook with the power emanating from Michael, and even the elders watching from afar could feel the moment's intensity. The hall was engulfed in an intense heat that lingered even after the dark flames dissipated. Mutrad could feel the sweat trickling down his forehead, but his mind was preoccupied with the Dark Lord's presence before him. As he looked into Michael's eyes, he was struck by a flood of memories from the Ithilien massacre. The same cold, unwavering gaze that had sent shivers down his spine then was present in the Dark Lord's eyes now. It was a look that promised destruction and death to anyone who dared cross him. The Merman elder stood tall, his voice echoing through the hall as he spoke to the Dark Lord. "You have your child and killed the one responsible for his disappearance. Now leave our world," he demanded. But Michael remained unmoved, his eyes blazing with an intense fury. He knew that his mission was far from over, and he was not about to be stopped by a group of Merman elders. Michael's response was simple but deadly. "You have two choices. Back off and save yourselves, or stand in my way and die with him," he said, raising his sword and pointing it at Gruzel. As Michael raised his sword and pointed it at Gruzel, Mutrad felt a sense of impending doom. The Dark Lord's eyes were filled with a fiery rage that Mutrad had seen before, during the massacre in Ithalan. He knew that Michael was not one to back down, and the Merman elder's defiance could only lead to bloodshed. Mutrad's heart raced as he realized he might be witnessing another brutal massacre, and he wondered if there was anything he could do to prevent it. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.